Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. The chairman of the board, David Reed, is here. Unfortunately, I kind of screwed up and meant to send some cuts to Reed that I didn't send until just now. So, Reed, we'll just assume that you're there. Good to see you. Now, the Titans held their pre-draft press conference earlier today, and the Tennessee Titans have made it obvious through their pre-draft press conference, though it was already reported by Ian Rappaport at NFL Network today, that the Titans already know who they're taking, and you already know who they're taking, and I already know who they're taking, and we all know who they're taking. Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. In fact, I think in the press conference, the media kind of treated it like, hey, you're not allowed to ask directly if you're going to take Cam. But if they had, I actually think there's a pretty good chance, even though the draft's a TV show and even though the league would prefer that you not just come out and say it, if somebody had asked, so are you taking Cam Ward number 1 overall? I think there's a pretty good chance they would have said yes. I mean, again, they were asked by their own employee if they've already made up their mind who they're going to take. And they said yes. They talked at length about Cam Ward's confidence. They talked about the kind of guy he is. They talked about getting to know his family. They talked about the process. They talked about they're taking Cam Ward. Again, it's already been reported. We already know. And as I just said on the midday show at the end, we've known this, at least I have, since PK left the combine and said they're not going to be in on Darnold. They're not going to be on Rodgers. They're not going to be on any of those guys. And I said, well, congratulations. Then they're taking Cam Ward with that pick. Because as soon as I heard they weren't interested in Darnold, they weren't interested in Rodgers, I knew they're taking Cam Ward because I said the options are 1, take Cam Ward, 1, sign Sam Darnold, 2, take Cam Ward, 3, suck. That's the problem the Browns and the Giants have right now is they couldn't get option 1 or option 2. So now they just, quite frankly, are probably going to suck. But here's what concerns me when it comes to the Titans and the Titans' decision to take Cam Ward. And that is that while I believe Cam Ward, and I've watched Cam Ward's tape, I think Cam Ward's first-round player. And everything I've heard about Cam Ward off the field as a leader, as a guy, and not just from the Titans, but from other people as well. I heard Elijah Arroyo, the tight end at Miami, talk about Cam going from a 0-star recruit and the kind of leader he was at Miami, and those things do matter. But again, nobody, with maybe the exception of Louis Riddick, thinks that Cam Ward is the best player in this draft. And that's what's been bothering me this whole time, is that it feels like a need pick. It feels like the Titans are sitting there at number 1 overall. They have 1 wide receiver. They have no tight end. They've got a coach who's, I think, on the hot seat, but after today, maybe not. They're moving into a new stadium. They don't have a quarterback. Again, it feels like a need pick. Other than Louis Riddick, who's been the one guy that compares him to Mahomes, most people throughout this process have kind of shrugged this off and said, yeah, Cam's good, but he's not John Elway. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not Peyton Manning. He's not a 1-1 quarterback prospect. And Chad Brinker was talking today, and he said with his mentors, people he's learned from, that there's a one thing in particular that gets these guys in trouble. This is what Chad Brinker said today.
I mean, you want to take the best player available. Everybody says that. Not everybody follows that. The times in my career where I've seen we've made mistakes, either earlier in my career to even some of my mentors, when you kind of reach on a player based off need. Like Mike just said, I mean, we got a lot of needs. So we're just going to trust the process. We're going to trust the board. We're going to let the board talk to us. The work has been done. We're prepared. Now, the draft is unpredictable at times, and I know we're picking at the top, so maybe a little bit more of an understanding of who might be there, who might not be there. But at the same time, we're prepared for whatever comes at us, and we just got to take the best player.
Okay. So he says we got to take the best player. And the teams that get screwed up, including my mentors, they get screwed up when they don't take the best player, when they make a need pick. Mike Borgonzi today was talking about, hey, the philosophy of how they're going to draft. And again, this is a philosophy that everybody says it sounds good, but in the moment, it's very hard for teams to do. Here's what Mike Borgonzi had to say today.
We certainly have a lot of needs in the team right now. So, we're going to do our best to, stay true to the board, draft the best player available, not really reach for needs at this point. But this is a big opportunity for this organization, really a tone setter, this draft for the guys that we bring in here right now.
Okay. So again, Brinker, the guy who's technically in charge, says we got to draft the best player available. Borgonzi says we can't reach. We have to be true to the board. And they're going to take a quarterback that almost nobody thinks is the best player in this draft. Do you see how that could be a problem? In fact, I took the big boards from Pro Football Focus, NFL.com's Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper Jr., The Athletic's Dane Brugler, and the CBS big board. I feel like that's probably the top of each kind of media outlet, at each major media outlet. Todd McShays is behind a paywall. Sorry, he doesn't count. But again, PFF, NFL Network, Mel Kiper, The Athletic, CBS. Feel like I've kind of hit every angle here. Cam Ward averages as the 10th best player in the draft. PFF has him at 20. Daniel Jeremiah has him at 8. Mel Kiper Jr. has him at 6. The Athletic has him at 13th. And CBS, and I don't know where they got this, CBS has him at 3. So again, this is the average is he's the 10th best player in this class. Now, there is no doubt that he is the best quarterback in this class, and I believe that too. But he's not the best player in this draft class. If the Titans were so sold on best player available, do not reach, then we'd be having discussions about drafting Ashton Genty with the number 1 overall pick. But we're not. Instead, we're talking quarterback because, well, they need a quarterback. Just like the Browns need a quarterback. Just like the Giants need a quarterback. The Patriots have a young quarterback. Again, not a sure thing, but a very highly regarded prospect. They have no interest in your quarterback, Cam Ward. Why? Because their guy's rated better than your guy. So one of two things has to be the case. Either the Titans have this grand philosophy that we're going to take the best player available, and their board just happens to be pretty much the opposite of everybody else's, that says Cam Ward is absolutely worth the first overall pick, or they're reaching the one thing that they've said they can't do. It's one or the other. Again, either their board is incredibly different than everybody else's. Again, PFF has him ranked as the 20th best player in this draft. You can't take the 20th best player with the first overall pick. You can't do that in any draft. You can't even go back to 1984 and take Boomer Esiason, who was the first quarterback off the board. He went in the second round. You can't take him number 1 overall. So it's one or the other. And the Titans, I keep hearing them talk about a disciplined process. Our process is going to be very thorough. It's going to be very disciplined. Borgonzi said disciplined over and over and over again throughout this process, including today. Brinker was asked a question about how Borgonzi's done by, shockingly, Jim Wyatt. And Brinker talked about, oh, yeah, there's been such a disciplined process. Again, discipline is not reaching with the number 1 overall pick, even though you need a quarterback, even though the free agent options out there aren't all that appealing, even though the rest of the draft looks stinky at quarterback, but not going off your board just because we need a quarterback. One general manager told Adam Schefter, and who knows if this is true or not, but one general manager told Adam Schefter this week he doesn't have a first-round grade on any quarterback in this draft. Not one. So again, one of two things is possible. Either the Titans, a team that has been known over the years for saying we do things differently than everybody else, and they'll see how smart we are, like drafting a right tackle to play left tackle last year. The Titans either have it all wrong and their board is a mess, or they're reaching, which is the one cardinal sin in drafting that everybody would agree with, that they've even said today they can't do. It has to be one or the other. And I know how you all feel. I know you all feel like the Titans are so smart. The Titans, with their great general manager with zero experience, their president of football operations, who was Ran Carthon's lieutenant for each and every stupid decision they made, like drafting a guard with the 11th overall pick, or drafting a right tackle to play left tackle, or trading a third-round pick for a guy with bad knees. And their head coach, who's got one season under his belt, who already promised us he could develop a young quarterback and failed, unless they're just so much smarter than everybody else in the NFL. That's what it is. Boy, this is not a good feeling. Again, I knew they were drafting Cam Ward, so it's not like this is some sort of meltdown. But I have a hard time with the Titans wagging their finger about best player available and letting the board speak to them when they're going to reach at number one simply because they need a quarterback. It is incredibly disheartening, but we just have to hope that they're right for the first time in, I don't know, 10 years. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025. We are rocking and rolling. Again, I can deal with the taking a reach because you got to have a quarterback. And, well, we think this guy's going to be good. And we think it's going to. What I can't deal with is, yeah, we have to go with the best player available. So we're going to take the best player off the board. He's not the best player on anybody's board. I guess he's the best player on yours. I guess he's the best player on only yours, for whatever that's worth. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. That's 615-737-1025. Plus, I have a theory. I have a theory that they will never admit to. But I think this makes the most sense because it truly makes more sense than the Titans just saying, nope, we're good with Cam Ward. He's Joe Burrow. So we'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
you guys come to that consensus?
You know, it's such a long process here, and we wanted to go through the whole thing. I don't know if there was a certain point along the process, but we were listening the whole time. And then, you know, as we got towards the end of the process, you know, we decided as an organization we're going to stay.
That was Mike Borgonzi today saying, hey, as an organization, we decided as we went through the process, we decided we were going to stay. It was a consensus. Again, Cam Ward, the one thing that is a consensus about Cam Ward is that he's not the best player in this draft. Now, he is the best quarterback, I believe, in this draft. I certainly think he's better than Tyler Shuck, and I'm not a Tyler Shuck hater, but I think Tyler Shuck is a backup. I watched him play in college. I think he's a backup. I think Shedeur Sanders secretly kind of stinks. And I think that the league feels that way. And now we're starting to see, because he's a TV prospect, people pick up on that. I think Jackson Dart is one of those guys. Now, look, this happened with Mahomes, and it's happened with Aaron Rodgers and other guys who he's probably viewed as more of a system quarterback than he's viewed as an NFL quarterback. So Cam's definitely the top quarterback in the class. I have nothing against that. But again, the consensus is he's not the top player in this class. And I have a theory. And my theory is that Amy Adams Strunk is the one guiding this decision. You know, we played a cut yesterday from Bill Polian. And I know a lot of you out there don't think Bill Polian knows anything, even though he's been to 6 Super Bowls and has a gold jacket. But, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion on who knows what. But Bill Polian talked about how when you have the number 1 pick, the owner gets involved and the people that talk to the owner get involved and everybody's got an opinion, and now you go from there. And I watched the Titans practically lie to everybody last year throughout the entire offseason, whether it was about how good of a general manager and talent evaluator Rand Carthon was, to whether or not Will Levis was going to be a franchise quarterback. Now, maybe they were so stupid that they believed all of that. I did not. But again, it was obvious. We called it the offseason of toxic positivity. And in the offseason of toxic positivity, they gaslit the fans into thinking this was going to be a good team. I kept saying they wouldn't be. And by week 3, when Malik Willis walked in here and shoved his foot squarely up your rear end, Titan fans realized, oh my God, we were sold a bill of goods. We were sold a lemon. This team sucks. And I wondered deep down inside if the offseason of toxic positivity was simply because, well, the Titans are moving into a new stadium and the Titans are asking for these exorbitant PSL prices. And so the Titans have to get people excited about paying $70,000 and $35,000 for a PSL price to a ticket. And that's why I don't think anybody said a negative word. Nobody even said a cautionary word. Now, could you imagine Mike Vrabel, for instance, getting up to the podium and selling you on how good the team's going to be? Could you imagine Mike Vrabel going on Bussin' with the Boys and doing what Brian Callahan did when he was like, Will Levis is a big reason of why I took this job. And the reason I think we're going to be much better than people think is because we've got Will Levis and I went into Titans' house. I mean, my dad and I, we bought PSLs. I went into Titans' house. There was a framed picture of Will Levis right there on the wall. They're trying to sell tickets. Now, the Titans will tell everybody who will listen that they're doing great as far as the PSL sales are concerned. That might be true, but I certainly don't trust the Titans. And I know this, if the PSL sales weren't doing well, the last person that would tell you that is the Titans. So I'm going to take it with a grain of salt when they say, oh, our PSL sales are so far ahead of what we thought. I mean, we are humbled by the fact that we're the worst team in the league and people still want to drop massive coin to be able to buy PSLs at our new stadium. And I thought Gentry asked this in a column he wrote about Rand Carthon when he talked about how they promised everybody everything was going to be so great, and it's not. And it felt like it was kind of rehearsed this previous offseason about how great everything was, the vibes in the building, and how that might have just had an audience of one, Amy. And about how, again, this was all to pump up excitement while we know in our heads they have a ticket base to go sell at a new stadium. And again, I know the Titans spent a bunch of money on Dan Moore, but if you look at their payroll, it's towards the bottom of the league. And we see the Titans cutting costs on a consistent basis. I mean, the Titans, when it comes to, yeah, we can't pay for a real backup quarterback, so let's just go get Brandon Allen. That's what they're doing. And so I wonder if the quarterback is an edict from Amy of, do you think he can be any good? Well, Miss Amy, we think he can be good, but he's got some holes in his game. It's going to take a while to develop them. We're going to have to be patient. We can't just, well, let's just take him to sell tickets. Because, again, I just have such a hard time being lectured by the Titans about best player available or letting the board speak to them. And then just thinking that the Titans have an entirely different board than every other team in the NFL. With the Giants, I know why the Giants have to get the number one to take a quarterback. Because they're desperate. Because they missed on Daniel Jones, whom they gave a contract extension to. Because they didn't draft J.J. McCarthy last year or Michael Penix or Bo Nix. Because they stunk last season. And they got rid of Daniel Jones and didn't have a young option. Because they chased Matthew Stafford and he turned them down. Because they talked to Aaron Rodgers and he said no. So finally they said, okay, screw it. Let's try to get to number one. But let's not try too hard. Let's not offer heaven and earth because we don't think that player's that good. But we're going to have to get to number one because that's our only choice. And even then it's like, all right, fine, go get Russell Wilson. We know why the Browns have to trade to number one. And not only that, I'm saying, is Amy Adams Strunk the one who's making this pick? Is Amy Adams Strunk the one who's calling the shot here saying, draft me the quarterback? Well, if Cleveland were to have made a trade or have tried to make the trade, whatever. If Cleveland had decided they wanted Cam Ward number one, who would you have accused of calling that shot? Oh, yeah, their terrible owner. And I go back to that Monday show after that embarrassing defeat at the hands of the Green Bay Packers. It's funny. I was actually on the lake this weekend, and one of the friends that we were on the lake with went to the Packer game with us, and I was like, man, what a disaster that game was. That was the game where everybody realized, holy crap, this team sucks. Everything they said this past offseason is not true. This team is going to be awful, and Malik Willis just killed us. And I said that Monday. I go, you know what? This starts with Amy. I mean, this is Amy to a T. The one constant in the bad decision-making over the last handful of years, it's been Amy. John Robinson fired in the middle of the season while the team's in first place. Ran Carthon as general manager. Firing Mike Vrabel, promoting both Ran Carthon and Chad Brinker. Firing just Ran Carthon, but keeping Chad Brinker. Making Chad Brinker keep Brian Callahan. Again, the consistent here, the constant, it's Amy. And so when I see the Titans saying, oh, yeah, no, we came to a consensus and we know who we're going to take, and we all know it's Cam Ward. And I see the Titans lecturing the media and telling you, oh, no, hey, we've learned that you make mistakes when you reach for players. So we're going to take the guy who PFF has ranked as the 20th best player in the draft. It's like, well, whose stupid idea was that? And I think it has to go back to the person who we have to kind of point the finger at when it comes to most of the stupid ideas around here. So again, maybe it's a conspiracy theory. Maybe Brinker and Borgonzi got to this on their own. I don't know. But this feels like something a stupid team would do. Reach on a quarterback who, again, nobody has as the number one player in this class. If you told me that you believed in best player available so much that you were going to take Travis Hunter, okay, that makes sense to me. If you said you believe in best player available so much that you were trying to make a case for Ashton Genty as the best player in a bad draft, again, I wouldn't take a running back number one overall, but I understand the sentiment. But you can't tell me that a guy who, again, the consensus here between Pro Football Focus, Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network, Mel Kiper Jr., The Athletic, and CBS, the consensus that the best player in this draft is the best player on your board. A guy who's not even a first rounder, according to a general manager that Adam Schefter spoke with this week. You cannot tell me that that's worthy of the number one pick. But that's what the bad teams do. And what's the one thing that, again, the Titans, the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, the Jags, the Jets, what's the one thing that they have in common? What's the one thing that Washington, who for years sat there with those crappy organizations, what's the one thing that is no longer holding that team back? It's the owner. It's as simple as that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Let's get to your phones because a lot of people want to weigh in. Stillman and Company, your reaction to the press conference. Again, they're taking Cam Board. It's done. 615-737-1025. It's 1025-1063 the game.
I think one of the things unique to my journey in this profession is I've done it before too. I've been a part of a young quarterback, number one overall pick, coming into a team that picked number one for a reason. And we weren't good enough last year, so we're picking first, and we have a chance to add a really good player with the first overall pick, whatever it ends up being. But there is a lot of things that I learned from that first lesson of when you bring in a player like that, that'll help us in the process.
That was Brian Callahan, who's like, hey, I've done this before. I've lived this. I was in Cincinnati as the offensive coordinator when we drafted Joe Burrow. So I've been there. So my follow-up to that would be, so do you think Cam Ward is Joe Burrow? Let me put it to you like this. If Cam Ward had Ed Orgeron as his coach, could Cam Ward win the national title? That's the question I would ask, because Joe Burrow did. And years later, I heard a podcast Colin Cowherd did with Ed Orgeron. I love referencing this podcast because I get to do a Coach O impersonation. But he said, when Joe Burrow came on his visit, he said, I don't want to do any of the recruiting stuff. I just want to eat crawfish and talk football. So we went into the football facility, we had crawfish, and we watched film. And there were about 5 of us in the room. And within 5 minutes, everybody in the room knew Joe Burrow was the smartest one there. I mean, Joe Burrow is special. Is Cam Ward that special? Again, I've done this. We've been through the process of developing the quarterback. In fact, it was part of the plan for us to get his ACL torn the first year, and this part of the plan for us to never get a functional offensive line in front of him. In fact, I think Cincinnati has quite frankly, and I don't want to say ruined Burrow or squandered Burrow, but I certainly don't think they've maximized what they could get out of Burrow and Chase and the rest of that team. They have the NFL's leading sacker. They have the best wide receiver. They have probably the best number 2 wide receiver. They've got a franchise left tackle, and they've got a freaking Jesus at quarterback. Like, they've got John Elway at quarterback. And they went to 1 Super Bowl. And last year they didn't even make the playoffs. So that gets me all worked up too. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. And I just saw the distinguished gentleman on the YouTube chat said that, yes, Cam Ward is like Joe Burrow. Crazy, I know. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. If you want to weigh in, one texter says, Mike Borgonzi seems like the only person at that table that is qualified to be there. Chad Brinker looked like a hostage, and Brian Callahan seems like the kid you let sit at the table when he should be at the kiddie table. Hopefully next offseason, Borgonzi gets his own head coach. I don't want to knock as much as I knock their decision-making. I don't want to sit there and say like, oh, Borgonzi looks qualified to be the GM, but Callahan doesn't look qualified to be the coach, because quite frankly, Borgonzi's qualifications are the same as Callahan's. Brinker's qualifications, I got a problem with. The Titans will try to sell you that, hey, he was with the Green Bay Packers forever. Yeah, as like the 6th in command. I mean, who's the area scout for the Houston Texans? Go get them. And then tell me, why, look what they did with the Texans. And I heard Brinker make a comment today. I almost threw up when I heard Brinker make a comment about how he was sitting there with Reggie McKenzie and Dave Ziegler and Mike Borgonzi, and all of them have Super Bowls under their belt, and amongst them, they have 9 Super Bowls. And I'm like, ugh. That's like Bill Belichick calls his boat. The name of his boat is 8 rings. Now, how many Super Bowls, David Reed, I'm going to ask you this. How many Super Bowls would you attribute to Bill Belichick?
0.
Well, they won 6.
Well, yeah, 0.
Okay. So I would argue that I would attribute 6 as the head coach. Well, my point is you don't get to count the 2 that you were assistant coach with the Giants. You don't get to count those.
Oh, I didn't even think about those.
That's what gets you the head coaching job. You don't get to count them. But that's what they're doing, is they're counting these old Super Bowls, and they're saying like, oh no, this is, we got all these Super Bowls here. Yeah, Dave Ziegler, man. How's that Tyree Wilson? You guys always crap on Bill Polian because he said he didn't like Lamar Jackson, as if that undoes everything Bill Polian did in his career. How did Dave Ziegler do? How's Tyree Wilson doing? They took him 7th overall 2 years ago. You ever heard of him? But that's who, again, is part of the consortium that the Titans have making these decisions. And, well, count his Super Bowls in there that Tom Brady won for him. One texter in the text line says, I can hear it in Amy's voice now, or you mimicking her voice, that she would say something like, Cam Ward reminds me of Steve McNair. Let me tell you something. If I was an owner, and I hate to act like I know what I'm doing because I don't, but I do feel like as an owner, I would sit there and I would say, okay, who does this quarterback remind you of and why? And I would hear them out and everything else. And then, hey, whoever they want to draft, that's what we'd have to do. That's what we would have to, we'd have to take whoever my guys that I hired want to draft. And if I don't trust their opinion on who to draft, then I wouldn't hire them or I'd fire them. But at some point, when it comes to the owners in this league, do you think they think like that? Or do you think that they sit there and think, no, I know. Like Jim Irsay in Indianapolis. You think Jim Irsay ever sits there and looks back and says, man, I've done a lot of dumb stuff as owner of the Colts. I mean, the whole idea of firing the coach and hiring Jeff Saturday, and I'll never fire Chris Ballard, and we've ruined Andrew Luck, and now we're ruining Anthony. I mean, we just, no. And I think that that's why these teams suck so bad, is because they have owners that say things like, he reminds me of Steve McNair. Based off of what? One texter goes, if all these so-called professionals think they know it all, where was Mahomes, Brady, Flacco, Purdy, and Jaden Daniels predicted to go? Jaden Daniels went 2nd last year. What are we talking about? I mean, where were they on Jaden Daniels? Right where he belonged. He was at the top of all the big boards along with Caleb Williams and Drake May, and he went number 2. And in every mock draft, he went number 2 or number 3. That's where the experts were there. Brady and Purdy, I'll give you. Now, I don't know if you guys heard what Chris Sims said about Purdy, but he basically said that, yeah, Purdy's just a passenger. Now, the boohoo Jalen Hurts crew, you guys have to come out with your pitchforks and defend Brock Purdy, because Brock Purdy got just as close as Jalen did at his first Super Bowl crack and didn't win. And so now you need to go defend Brock Purdy the same way you defend Jalen, because those two, in my opinion, are the ultimate passengers right now in the NFL. But to sit there and act like you would take Brock Purdy number 1, come on now. Just, in all seriousness, give me a break. Bob says, isn't it like Jared to speculate that the Bengals sucked last year because Brian Callahan left? But offense wasn't the problem. Defense was the problem. So I don't think that I would look back at that and say, well, the Bengals scored 40 points a game. The problem is they allowed 45. Oh, my God, if they had Brian Callahan there, I mean, you could clearly see his expertise wasting away on the Tennessee sideline. If they had Brian Callahan there, they'd have been really, really good. That one I struggle with a little bit. 615-737-1025. I don't know if the Titans are going to do this or not, but it does seem like if they're not lying, I shouldn't say lying because I don't know if a lie was told, but a lie I think was implied. But if they go this route that it sounds like they, on the record, seem to be okay with, we'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman & Company, and we're back to your phones as well. 615-737-1025 here on Stillman & Company. We'll be giving away Metallica tickets later today in the program. Hey, tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Sounds take on Durham at First Horizon Park. Pregame begins at 6:20. First pitch at 6:35. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and by Family Leisure. And speaking of baseball tonight, tune in to 102.5 The Game right here. Vandy Baseball as the Commodores take on MTSU at Hawkins Field. Pregame at 5:45. First pitch at 6 o'clock. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com.
Is it safe to say you know who you're picking at 1? And if so, what would it take to maybe change your mind at this point?
Yeah, no, we've come to a consensus. The entire organization is to stay at that pick, and I guess you'll find out Thursday night who we pick.
Did you have a lot of offers or a lot of interest from other teams?
There was interest. Yeah, I thought that was, doing our due diligence and going through the process to listen to those offers. And there were. I don't want to go into specifics of what the offer was or what the teams were, but there were offers.
That was Mike Borgonzi saying, hey, there were offers. Don't want to get into it. Were they any good? Like, were they good offers? Because if they were good offers, I think then you'll see the fans say, whoa. The Giants offered 3 number ones and you said no? So as of right now, I just feel like we're doing a lot of assuming. Let's get back to your phones. 615-737-1025. Will on Music Row says, is it safe to say that drafting for need has resulted in failure, whereas drafting the best overall player has been a success since the Mariota era began? And again, he says, generally speaking. Well, I'll put it to you like this. When you think of the best players the Titans have had over the last era of good Titan football. And I really feel like there were 2 eras. There was the McNair and George era, and then there was the Tannehill and Henry era. And I know Chris Johnson and that team, they went to a couple of playoffs, but they sucked. For the most part, it was pretty much the McNair, George era, and then the Henry Tannehill era. Do you know what Kevin Byard, Taylor Lewan, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Jeffrey Simmons all have in common? They did not start right away. Now, AJ played a lot right away, but they did not start. They were not need picks. For instance, when the Titans drafted Kevin Byard, they had Denoris Searcy and George Wilson. When Taylor Lewan was drafted, the Titans had Michael Roos and Michael Orr. When the Titans drafted Derrick Henry, they had DeMarco Murray. When Jeffrey Simmons was drafted, they had Jarrell Casey. And when A.J. Brown was drafted, the Titans didn't have a right guard at that point in time, but they did have Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, and again, it's almost embarrassing to say, oh, yeah, no, this isn't a need. We have Taywan Taylor. But they did have Taywan Taylor. Those aren't need picks. Is that crazy? Those are not need picks. You know what was a need pick? Jack Conklin leaving in free agency and drafting Isaiah Wilson in the first round. That was a need pick. Corey Davis, number 5 overall. That was a need pick. Need picks, in my opinion. J.C. Latham last year. We don't need Brock Bowers. Let's go with J.C. Latham because we need a tackle. Is he a left tackle? No. But we need a tackle. So yes, to answer your question, generally speaking, the need picks the Titans have made over the last decade have not worked. There's something I'm going to go dive deeper in here at some point that I found fascinating. Do you know that the Titans? No, I'm going to save it. This is something that I'm actually excited about to share with people. And so it should be something I tease into a topic around, not just something I throw out there. But it is something that I found fascinating. And I'll give you a hint. It's one odd, peculiar, I'm going to say coincidence. I don't know if it is a coincidence or not, but that the Titans and the Predators share. And it has to do with the draft. And I'll leave it at that. One texter says, the first time that I've ever heard Brian Callahan speak and thought he didn't really belong. It felt super scripted and not at all authentic. I don't know if I'd say that. I thought Callahan was fine at the press conference. I mean, again, Callahan knows. Callahan knows. These guys didn't hire him. These guys don't want him. He knows that. He knows, hey, man, I'm lucky I'm here. He knows it. And so I got to do the best I can with Cam Ward. And if I don't do the best I can with Cam Ward, I'm probably going to be the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati again. He knows that. And I think he's acting accordingly. Callahan's just doing whatever he can not to rock the boat. And I would say that if I was the one advising him, that would be exactly what I would tell him too. I got no beef with Callahan as of right now. Although there was one thing Callahan said that I was like, Okay, bro. But we'll get. One texter says, the Tyrod Taylor comp was really the best so far. I even went back and watched some of Tyrod Taylor's Virginia Tech highlights. You know what's funny is yesterday I played the cuts of Bill Polian saying that he didn't think Cam Ward was Peyton Manning or even Jared Goff. We played the cut of Thomas Dimitrov saying the Titans should trade back. We played the cut of Rick Spielman comping Tyrod Taylor for Cam Ward, a better version of Tyrod Taylor. And everybody's response was, oh, yeah, these fired general managers. I'd rather hear the current general managers. I'm like, you think that there are 32, you think these 32 general managers, all because they're a general manager, a current general manager of the NFL, you think they know more than Bill Polian, who won 229 games in the National Football League? You think all 32 of them? I mean, you just fired the worst general manager in the NFL. And now you basically replaced him with his lieutenant. I want you to think about that for a little bit. This time last year, you guys told me, I trust the current general managers who say J.C. Latham is a left tackle instead of your general managers, Jared. Okay. One texter says, we are all pretty sure the Titans are going to draft Cam Ward. We're not all pretty sure. We all know they're going to draft Cam Ward. They've said they're going to draft Cam Ward. But do we have to get a receiver in the second round to help him? Don't you think quarterbacks are good to great if they are able to make a receiver, meaning develop chemistry with each other? I just don't think that's a must-have in the second round. I think the Titans should go with the best player available in round 2. Well, if you expect Cam Ward, again, who Bill Polian, who's got a gold jacket doing this, says isn't even Jared Goff, if you expect Cam Ward to be a force multiplier on day 1, which is what Josh Allen is in Buffalo, we can go stick any crap ass out there at wide receiver and it'll be fine. We don't need Diggs. We don't need Gabe Davis. We don't need go put Shakir out there and he'll be fine. That's what Manning did for years. That's what Brady did for years. Now, it looked a lot better when Manning had Harrison or when Brady had Moss. But again, Brady could make chicken salad at times. If you think Cam Ward's going to be that on day 1, you're crazier than Louis Riddick, who thinks he's going to be Mahomes. And again, I think that is wild to be sitting here today and saying. 615-737-1025. You know, the Titans have fired a lot of people over the years, especially, you know, these behind-the-scenes people that have been there for a long time because they've got to raise the standard of excellence. Because, again, they know everything. But there's somebody today who I believe, at least if I'm supposed to believe the Titans and what they say, might actually be in a much better spot from a job stability standpoint than we think. I'll explain. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025 here on Stillman and Company. And do not miss the best NFL draft coverage right here on Thursday. We will be live at Twin Peaks in Madison. That's right, starting at 6 o'clock. And on Friday, we'll be live from Boomba's Pizza and Watch Bar in East Nashville. Coverage begins at 6 o'clock each day. You know the Thursday night crew? Me, Chris, Derek, Trevor. That's right. Presented by Hardee's, Parman Tractor and Equipment, Twin Peaks, Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, Shane Company, and Professional Home Improvements. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. 2 days to go until the NFL draft. It's funny because last year, my girlfriend and I were together during the draft, but she's Canadian, so she didn't totally understand everything one way or another. But she heard I did show her the outrage at the J.C. Latham pick, and I think she got a chuckle out of it. Now she understands a lot more of it, but she's like, hey, is there any chance on Wednesday night you can do the Grand Ole Opry? I'm like, nope, not on Wednesday night, not this week, folks. So we all know who the Titans are going to take. They're going to take Cam Ward number 1. They said it today. Ian Rappaport reported this morning. The Titans said they know who they're going to take. They said it's a consensus in the building. They talked up Cam Ward. Were not asked about a single other prospect as far as the draft was concerned in their press conference. And they said to other teams, don't call us, don't bother. So they know who they're going to pick. But one thing that has scared me, one of many things that have scared me about the prospects of the Titans drafting Cam Ward, is that it almost feels like the Titans are going to repeat the cycle of stupid that has doomed these franchises, especially the dumb ones, year after year after year, that has led to ruined quarterback after ruined quarterback. Now, every single football person I've talked to has told me it is massively important for a young quarterback to keep them with the same coach. For instance, Tom Brady had Charlie Weiss as his offensive coordinator his first season in the league under Bledsoe, his second season in the league when they won the Super Bowl, all the way for 3 more seasons and 2 more Super Bowls. You don't think that mattered? Patrick Mahomes has had 1 coach. Josh Allen had Brian Dable as his offensive coordinator. Brian Dable gets a head coaching job. Ken Dorsey in, Allen regresses. Dorsey out, Joe Brady in, Allen league MVP. It is a bad idea with a young quarterback to change the coach, and yet it happens time and time again. The Chicago Bears hired John Fox to be their head coach. A couple years later, they drafted Mitch Trubisky. 1 year into Trubisky, they fired Fox. And then they hired Matt Nagy. Then they drafted Justin Fields. 1 year into Fields, they fired Matt Nagy. Then they hired Matt Eberflus. They drafted Caleb Williams. And 1 year into Caleb, they fired Eberflus. And now Caleb is learning an entirely different offense, and they hope it'll work with Ben Johnson, and maybe it will. But again, that isn't really what you want to set your young quarterback up for. And the statistics are shocking when it comes to fired head coaches and first overall picks, and the amount of guys that end up taking a quarterback after they've earned the number 1 pick, and the amount of guys, sans Zach Taylor, that don't keep the job. Trevor Lawrence was viewed as one of the great prospects coming out. And I think we can all agree Trevor has not lived up to that. But how much of that is because they made Urban Meyer the head coach and de facto general manager Trevor's first year in the NFL? So one thing I worry about, and I'm not the biggest Brian Callahan fan in the world. I like Brian Callahan, but I'm not convinced he's a good coach. But one thing I am scared to death of is the Titans are going to take a young quarterback who needs development, and they're going to have him spend an entire offseason with Brian Callahan and Brian Callahan's system and Brian Callahan's vernaculars and learning things the Brian Callahan way. And then after a 4-win season, they're going to fire Callahan and bring somebody else in here to coach him, somebody who didn't pick him, somebody who's got a totally different philosophy, somebody who's got a totally different vernacular, and the expectations will be raised on Cam Ward. That should scare you too. They did that with Mariota. They did that with Will Levis. And again, who's to say Mariota would have been good with Andy Reid as his coach or not? Same with Levis. We don't know. You know what's funny? The year before Andy Reid took Mahomes, Andy Reid regretted not trading up for Paxton Lynch. And I always ask people, are you sure Paxton Lynch would have still been a bum if he had gone to Andy Reid? So one thing that scares me is this idea that the Titans are going to get rid of Brian Callahan. Well, Mike Borgonzi today was asked how important stability with the coach is if they're going to take a young quarterback number one, which we all know they're going to do. Here's what he said.
How important is that stability to being able to develop a quarterback and set him up for success?
I think it's very important. Just having that environment and stability around him. Coaches, front office, I've seen it done before. So I think that's a vital process. A part of the process is to have, that environment and stability for that player. I saw it, with Andy, with Patrick, and saw how that worked. And same thing with Brian, with Joe. So I think that's a big part of it.
Okay. Stability, very, very important. And then when it comes to the plan for the quarterback, how important is having the right coach and keeping that coach there?
How critical will it be for you guys together to be able to have that if you were to select a quarterback first?
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. And, and having a plan for the quarterback as well, as we've discussed, amongst Brian and Chad, and what is the plan for the quarterback, and having stability there and creating an environment for that player to succeed is all part of it. Sometimes you have to help these players along, and that's what coaching's here for, and that's what, front office is here for, to provide an environment for them to succeed.
Okay. Sounds to me like Mike Borgonzi said it without saying it, but he's committing himself to Brian Callahan. Because here's what's going to happen. Let's say the Titans win 5 games this year and fire Brian Callahan, which I woke up this morning, and if you put a gun to my head and say, hey, you got to put money down today, will Callahan be the coach next year of the Titans, yes or no? I would say I would absolutely have said no. Well, now, hey, he talked about how important the stability was, right? So it did seem like, hey, he's kind of saying he won't say it, and then won't say, oh, yeah, Brian will be here beyond this year. But he might as well have said it, because if they fire Brian Callahan, the first thing everyone's going to say is, well, hold on, wait a minute. You were the one that said stability for a young quarterback's incredibly important. Now, look, Chad Brinker's the one that told us Rand Carthon was going to do great things in the NFL and that he and Rand were aligned like long-lost brothers, and then he helped fire him, so who knows? But I really believe that today, Mike Borgonzi, regardless of whether or not he hired Brian Callahan, which he did not, but I do feel like today, Borgonzi kind of put the flag in the ground, and he said it without saying it. He committed to Callahan. He might as well have said, hey, Callahan's going to be here for the long haul. This is the guy we want coaching this young quarterback. Doesn't mean it's true. Guys say things all the time, mean the exact opposite, especially the Titans, where telling the truth very, very rarely happens. But there is a reason why people say either on the record or off the record. And a press conference is the definition of the record, because we all saw it. We all heard it. It sounds like he's willing to commit to Brian Callahan beyond this year. Now, that gets me a little excited, and it only gets me a little excited because, again, I'm not sure Callahan's a very good coach. We shall see. But the one thing that I do think is abundantly clear is the last thing I want is for the Titans to draft Cam Ward, spend an entire offseason, training camp, season, going through the ups and downs with Cam Ward, and then saying, okay, everything that last guy told you, forget about it. Here's your new coach, Matt Nagy. Here's your new coach, Mike McCarthy. So if that's actually how the Titans are thinking, that, hey, Brian Callahan, this is the guy that we want to grow this young quarterback, well, at least the philosophy is correct, even if maybe the guy that they're going to handpick to do it isn't. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And there's another thing Callahan said today that I have to kind of roll my eyes at. And I like Callahan, but come on now. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
I think we've added the right players in free agency. I think we have good young players here. And we got to do a lot better job coaching, first and foremost, and put ourselves in some better positions. So those things to me are all part of the equation. And I feel good about where we're at and where we're headed and how we're going to get there.
There you go. That was that was Brian Callahan saying, hey, we're going to have to do a little bit better job coaching. We're going to have to do a better job coaching this year. We did well in free agency, but we feel good. We're just going to have to do. And that was, I think, a very self-aware moment from Brian Callahan to sit there and say, hey, put the blame on me and my staff. We got to do a little bit better, but we are ready for the challenge. And so Brian Callahan was asked about how to develop Cam Ward. And Brian Callahan went to the well on something that, I'm sorry, maybe you'll buy this, but I will not. Here's what Brian Callahan said.
I think one of the things unique to my journey in this profession is I've done it before too. You know, I've been a part of a young quarterback, number one overall pick, coming into a team that picked number one for a reason, you know, and we weren't good enough last year. So we're picking first and we have a chance to add a really good player with the first overall pick, whatever it ends up being. But there is a lot of things that I learned from that first lesson of when you bring in a player like that, that'll help us in the process.
Okay. So he's saying right there, like, hey, I've been through this before. So I've done this. We took a quarterback number one in Cincinnati, and we all know the story with Joe Burrow. We all know Joe Burrow is either the second, third, or maybe even the best quarterback in the NFL. I mean, for me, Burrow gets hurt too much as far as saying he's better than Mahomes, but the one guy who seems to be able to beat Mahomes on a somewhat consistent basis is Burrow. He's the one guy. Well, Brady, but Brady's retired. So I watch Joe Burrow play, and I feel like I'm watching John Elway. Cam Ward is not Joe Burrow. Everybody has tried to tell you that. Now, there's going to be a handful of Titan fans out there that aren't going to want to listen, and they're going to say that Cam Ward is the next Mahomes or Allen or whomever. But Joe Burrow was a slam dunk 1-1 prospect. He went number one overall, and not one person batted an eyelash. When it came out that the Bengals were not interested in the overtures from the Miami Dolphins of 3 number one draft choices and more, according to Adam Schefter, to move up to number one for Joe Burrow, we all understood it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Burrow was on the same level of Trevor Lawrence, who was viewed as a generational prospect and has not become that. But Burrow was absolutely a legitimate, high-end, number one quarterback prospect. Minus the small-ish hands, and I believe Cam has the same small hands Burrow has. Other than that, there was not a blemish on that man's resume. He was a Heisman Trophy winning national champion at 6'4" and 220 pounds. He had the requisite arm strength to make every throw on the field. He had demonstrated an ability to do it, and he had won at a high level. Well, Cam hasn't necessarily done that. Cam's 6'1", 6'2". He's not 6'4". That does matter. I heard Rick Neuheisel talking about that today, about being able to get the ball out when you're not as tall as the other guys. But again, Joe Burrow was a special player. And so when Brian Callahan sits up there and says, hey, I've been through this before, I don't buy it. And the reason I don't buy it is because isn't that what he was selling last year? Wasn't Brian Callahan selling last year? You know, hey, in Cincinnati, we had Joe Burrow, and here we have Will Levis. And I've developed these young quarterbacks, and I know what it takes, and Will Levis is ready for this. Only to watch him flick the ball to the Bears in the first game of the year and roll the ball on the ground to the Jets. And it's not as if Levis significantly improved over the course of the season. He had a 3-game stretch where I think they won 1 game, and he threw a pick 6 in a win, and it was like, oh my God, he's so much better, and then didn't score a touchdown the next week and got benched. You can't take the job under the premise of, hey, I can develop Will Levis because I helped develop Joe Burrow. And then a year later say, I can develop Cam Ward because I developed Joe Burrow. That was the message last year. You don't get to use the same message again. And it's almost like And I just came up with this analogy off the top of my head, but that would be like if you sent out a Christmas card with your fiance. You end up not getting married. A year later, you're with somebody else, and you just paste her photo over the other Christmas card and say, Happy Holidays. You don't get the same line twice. And again, you've got to tell what's the plan here at quarterback. You've got to give me something. You've got to tell me something as far as why you're the guy for the job. You know, again, and I'll use the offensive line as an example. The Titans are taking a risk by signing Dan Moore to a $50 million guaranteed contract. They are overpaying an average left tackle in the NFL. And I'm fine with that because that's what happens in order to get a quality starter at a premium position in the NFL. You got to pay through your tush. So that's what they're doing. But you know what nobody's doing this year, including the Titans? Because the Titans think that Dan Moore at 26 years old can still get better. Nobody is sitting here saying, Bill Callahan will fix the line this year. We don't need to spend $50 million because we have Bill Callahan. And nobody's saying that because that's what they said last year. So when it comes to, hey, Brian Callahan, how can you show, how do we know that you're ready to develop Cam Ward? You can't say, well, I did with Joe Burrow. I could have developed Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was developed when he got to the Bengals. Joe Burrow was the coach of that LSU team because I know it wasn't Ed Orgeron. Joe Burrow was the coach, and I would argue Joe Burrow's probably the coach and general manager in Cincinnati because I don't think Zach Taylor or Duke Tobin or Brian Callahan or anybody else is getting that cheap old curmudgeon upstairs to go spend $1 gazillion on the receivers. But Joe did. But that's because Joe is special. Again, Mike Shanahan. I don't know if you would say he developed John Elway, but that doesn't mean that he could develop RG3. Just crazy talk. How do we, well, you know, I did it with Joe Burrow. Okay. Congratulations. You did it with Joe Burrow, a ready-made prospect who will never be stopped by anybody. Congratulations. That was what got you the job, was Joe Burrow. This time last year, people thought he can turn Will Levis into Joe Burrow. Now he's going to turn Cam Ward into Joe Burrow. Okay, easy. 615-737-1025. Lenny says, our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Lenny says the Titans will ruin Cam Ward. I agree. But I also think that, if the Titans don't do anything beyond what it looks like they're going to do, which is they're going to draft Cam Ward. They're going to play him right away. There's no chance that Brandon Allen starts over him. No chance Levis starts over him. No chance anybody else starts. He just is given the keys right away, and they'll say, here you go. And he's throwing to Ridley and Chig. He'll fail. But if they actually have a plan, like they've said, you have to have a full plan for the quarterback. If they actually have a plan, then Cam has a chance. If not, then I don't know. One texter says, could you see a scenario where Callahan is forced out as the head coach so the front office can hire their guy, but given the opportunity to stay with the organization as the offensive coordinator to continue to develop Cam Ward? No, that's not how this works. That's not how this works. Now, we have seen this. I think Dave Campo was an example of this. He was the head coach in Dallas, and then 7-8 years later came back as either the DC or the safeties coach. Vance Joseph was the head coach in Denver, and then 6 or 7 years later came back to be defensive coordinator. So we've seen some of that. Bobby Petrino is the OC at Arkansas after he fell off the motorcycle 15 years ago. No. If they move on, if they decide, okay, that's enough, like we're moving on, and Callahan's not our guy and we're going to go hire Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy, is the offensive coordinator. Like he is the de facto play caller, OC, etc., and he's going to want his own staff. And it's probably going to be a lot of the guys he had in Chicago. It's probably going to be a couple of guys that get promotions from Kansas City, and then maybe a guy here or there stays on the staff. But it's going to be the Matt Nagy show if that's what they do. There is no way that, for continuity's sake, let's demote Callahan. That never happens. in today's NFL. 615-737-1025. Here's our phone number, 615-737-1025. So you guys do not like Bill Polian anymore because he has not been high on Cam Ward. You do not like Rick Spielman because he compared Cam Ward to a better version of Tyrod Taylor. There is another guy who now I guess Titan fans are just going to have to hate, since the guy Titan fans really want is they want the guys that say they're the best. So we'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5 and 106 The Game.
I mean, you want to take the best player available. Everybody says that. Not everybody follows that. The times in my career where I've seen we've made mistakes, either earlier in my career to even some of my mentors, when you kind of reach on a player based off need. Like Mike just said, I mean, we got a lot of needs. So we're just going to trust the process. We're going to trust the board. We're going to let the board talk to us. The work has been done. We're prepared. Now, the draft is unpredictable at times, and I know we're picking at the top, so maybe a little bit more of an understanding of who might be there, who might not be there. But at the same time, we're prepared for whatever comes at us, and we just got to take the best player.
There you go. That was Chad Brinker today. We got to take the best player available. And according to Pro Football Focus, they're going to take the 20th best player available. According to Daniel Jeremiah at NFL Network, they're going to take the 8th best player available. According to Mel Kiper Jr., they're going to take the 6th best player available. According to The Athletic, they're going to take the 13th best player available. In fact, Mel was ranting about that yesterday. We played that cut about, hey, the Titans are trying to hit a grand slam. They're trying to take a kid that's got talent that could be good, and they're going to try and hope and pray that he does. So you guys do not like the people. And I say you guys, but I am painting a broad brush, but I don't know what the percentage of Titan fans are. I'm going to say it's probably around 75%, if I had to guess. You guys do not like the fact that I use references from former executives or gold jacket Hall of Famers, people that really know what they're doing, that say, I'm not so sure on Cam Ward. Bill Polian, we don't like him. Bill Polian said that Cam Ward doesn't even profile as a Jared Goff type prospect. Robbie and Rexford have said no more talking about Bill Polian, even though, again, Bill Polian is a gold jacket Hall of Famer. Just ask this question. Who do you think knows more about the 5 families, you or Vito Corleone? I guess a lot of you think it's you. You don't like Thomas Dimitroff because he says the Titans should trade back. You don't like Rick Spielman because he compared Cam Ward to a better version of Tyrod Taylor. Every single one of those guys has general managered a team to the conference championship. 2 of them have led a team to the Super Bowl. Polian won it and is a Hall of Famer, but their opinions don't count. Well, add Pat Kerwin to the list. Pat Kerwin, longtime NFL coach, longtime NFL executive, and has been in the media now for a while. He hosts a show on SiriusXM NFL Radio. If you know Pat Kerwin, you know he knows ball. Here's what Pat Kerwin said about the Titans taking Cam Ward at number 1 and his hesitance for them doing that.
Let's talk about Cam Ward. Is he a gold jacket guy?
I don't think so. No.
Right. So now when you take him, and let's say they admit that to themselves, was he a Pro Bowl quarterback? Let's say they think no. Now, if you're just going pure need and you don't think he's a gold jacket, that'd be really, I'm stealing the words of our old friend Dave Gettleman, which was his rationale for a top 4 or 5 pick. If you don't think he's that, and you don't even know if he's a Pro Bowler, which is the point a lot of these guys will be making in the room, then why take him? Because you need him. Well, is that a good enough reason? Because I can tell you, you take a quarterback at 1 and he's not a great player, you're going to get haunted down the road. You might have satisfied your fan base and your media for now, but if you don't really believe in your heart of hearts that guy is going to be a great player, you could be in for some professional trouble, if I will.
Okay. He just told you everything Chad Brinker says. You know, you got to take the best player available, because I've seen time and time again that if you don't take the best player available, that's really where it becomes a problem. Even some of my mentors have gone through moments where they didn't take the best player available. So we're going to take the guy that PFF says is the 20th best player on the board. We're going to take him number 1 overall. We're going to take a guy who, again, the consensus amongst NFL Network, PFF, Mel Kiper, The Athletic, and CBS, the average is 10th. We're going to take the 10th best player in the draft because we need him. And Pat Kerwin, again, is telling you, do you think he's a gold jacket guy? No. Do you even think he's a Pro Bowl caliber guy? Come on now. If you do this, if you draft him number 1, you're going to be in trouble for it. And again, I'm sure people are going to, who cares what Pat Kerwin thinks? So again, who cares what Pat Kerwin thinks? Who cares what Rick Spielman thinks? And by the way, when everyone says these are fired general managers, well, what about the unnamed general manager that told Adam Schefter he doesn't have a first-round grade on any quarterback in this draft? That's a current general manager. So do you not trust him? Because we don't like Bill Polian anymore. He doesn't count. He's some old geezer. He said Lamar Jackson wasn't that good years ago. You know who else said Lamar Jackson wasn't that good years ago? Everybody in the NFL, including the Ravens, who drafted Hayden Hurst before they drafted Lamar Jackson. But again, Polian, bad. Dimitrov, bad. He's bad. He sucks. All he ever did was draft Matt Ryan and go to conference championship games and have a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. He sucks. Rick Spielman, he was a GM for 17 years, drafted Justin Jefferson. He sucks. And guess what? He's working for the Jets right now. So you can't say these guys who can't get a job because he's got a job. And then there's Pat Kerwin. There's a one guy who I would say qualifies to the level of insight, the resume, will you, that has said, hey, Cam Ward, slam dunk, do it. And it's Mike Tannenbaum. And I'm not the biggest Tannenbaum fan in the world, but Tannenbaum was a former general manager. Tannenbaum did go to conference championship games. Tannenbaum did build a good Jets team. Like, I got to give Tannenbaum some credit. So there's one guy, Tannenbaum, who is sold on Cam Ward. Everybody else, not so much. The guys you listen to on TV, like Louis Riddick and Dan Orlovsky, and they don't know if it's pumped or stuffed. So I don't care what they think. Just like I'm sure there are players out there today. Shannon Sharp was talking about how he doesn't believe Cam Ward will be like Jaden Daniels because he doesn't believe there's a Jaden Daniels in this draft. I don't care what Shannon Sharp says. But the former general managers, the guys who have done it, the guys who have been executives in the league, the guys who have been in the position that these guys are in now, that have more experience and have learned through making those mistakes, they're telling you, they're trying to warn you to say, hey, now, be very, very careful here. Be very careful. And all these Titan fans like, what do they know? What do these guys know? They don't know anything. Again, I had to deal with the same thing last year. We played this cut from Rick Spielman, who was talking about J.C. Latham. And he said, look, Bill Callahan's the most respected offensive line coach in the league. But all I'm saying, and this is what Rick Spielman said, he goes, all I'm saying is when you take a blue player and you move him to another position, the chances of him being that good at another position are not very high. And I know it worked with Jalen Ramsey, but it's not going to work with everybody. That's why you got to have rules and principles and everything else. And they're talking about, is he a gold jacket guy? Because if you're taking a guy in the top 4, he needs to be a gold jacket guy. Does he profile? Nope. Okay, well, what are you doing here? But again, you guys, you people out there, you're just like, oh my goodness gracious. We don't listen to any of these guys. We only listen to our guys. Do you know how much experience Brinker, Borgonzi, and Callahan have compared to, again, those guys we're talking about? Yeah, give me a break. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to some of your phones. I do. There is a rant I have to go on that I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to go nuts. If and when this happens, I'm going to go freaking insane. We'll get to that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on the program. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106.3 The Game.
Jared, so knowing what you know of Vrabel,
Sure.
and if he is in charge, how do you think the draft goes? Do you see a guy that, sounds like a Vrabel kind of guy? And, well, Tennessee's sitting at 1.
Sure.
You're not going to do the quarterback. So, I mean, you should know the top 5. Like, break that, handicap that for me, knowing what you know about Vrabel.
Oh, my God. This Will Campbell, he's a tackle at LSU. He's apparently a big old fatty, and they think he might have to kick into guard, and that's just perfect for Mike Vrabel because he loves the tackles that can't play tackle. I mean, that Peter Skoronski thing, I mean, I remember when they drafted him, and they had the softest left tackle in the league in Andre Dillard, who was a bust in Philly, and they brought him in here. Vrabel's one of those coaches. Maz, I bet you've seen this in baseball a lot. That was like a top prospect somewhere else. Guy cannot adjust in the major leagues, but there's some hitting coach or some manager that's like,
can fix him.
I can coach him. Let me tell you right now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I watched him hit a ball 450 feet out there at spring training. Well, I'm telling you, I can coach him. Vrabel will look at one of these tackles, and because the Patriots offensive line is as bad as the Titans, and so they got to draft an offensive lineman. They'll take the Campbell kid out of LSU or the Banks kid out of Texas, and Vrabel will say, I can coach him. And maybe he can, but with the Titans, he couldn't. That was me on the Felger and Maz program in Boston during the Super Bowl. And that was probably one of my favorite moments of the Super Bowl this year, was just going on and crapping about Vrabel. So I'm up there on the set. They got an entire staff out there. It's a whole production, lights everywhere. We ran the stream as I was doing that. And they're like, well, who do you think the Patriots should take? I'm like, the hell if I know. I've been sitting here just, I'm more worried about the Titans and the quarterback. I don't know who else is in this draft. And I'm like, I don't know, this big old fatty Will Campbell. Well, it sounds like the Patriots are going to draft Will Campbell with the 4th overall pick. We know Ward's going number 1. We know Hunter's going number 2. We know Carter's going number 3, even though the Giants don't want to trade Carter or don't want to take Carter. Carter's going 3. And we know that apparently, according to Rich Eisen, the Patriots are going Will Campbell, the left tackle, short arms out of LSU, with the 4th overall pick. Here's what Rich Eisen said on his show.
My gosh, I'm just so excited. NFL Draft Week is here. I'm going to be hosting an NFL draft coverage on NFL Network for the 22nd time on Thursday night.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
Oh, yes, I forgot about the victory lap Rich took.
I intend
himself.
to do it in Pittsburgh next year, and
Can't
so on and so
stop,
forth. I could stop. I'm hearing the Patriots are going to do the sensible thing and go Will Campbell out of LSU, and that Cam Ward and Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter and Will Campbell will be the first 4 picks of the draft. And then everybody's like, well, then it's going to definitely be Mason Graham, 5th overall. And that does make sense that they take this.
Okay, stop it there. So Rich Eisen says the Patriots are taking Will Campbell. So I looked it up today. Will Campbell's arm length at the combine, 32 5/8 inches. So 32 inches and 5/8. Supposedly the line of demarcation is 33 inches. Peter Skoronski, I looked up his arms. Peter Skoronski, 32 1/4. So the difference, according to the combine measurements, between Skoronski and Campbell is 3/8 of an inch. No, excuse me, 4/8 of an inch. So what, half an inch? So a half an inch is the difference between these two guys. And Mike Vrabel, as head coach of the Titans, drafted Peter Skoronski, put him at freaking guard, and under no circumstances was he allowed to play left tackle. We had to watch Andre Dillard and what's that bums it? Jalen Duncan. We had to watch Andre Dillard and Jalen Duncan give up 29 sacks at left tackle in 2023. And all year we kept saying, could you move Skoronski to left tackle? And all year Vrabel kept saying, no, he's a guard, he's a guard, he's a guard. And so I figured when I did that because I'm like, hey, who should the Patriots pick when I'm up there? Oh, you know what? There's a left tackle who's pretty good college left tackle, and Vrabel won't ever let him play tackle because apparently his arms aren't long enough, but freaking Vrabel's going to care about taking a guard, and he's going to. So let me just say this. If they take the short-armed left tackle out of LSU and Mike Vrabel plays him at left tackle, after we spent the entire 2023 season watching those bums at left tackle, with the Titans having drafted an All-American left tackle with the 11th overall pick, and with Mike Vrabel's refusal to play him at left tackle, in spite of the fact that everybody who is not being brainwashed by the Titans knows that left tackle is a more important position than left guard. If Vrabel goes and does a 180 and drafts the short-armed fatty out of LSU and sticks him at left tackle, I am going to go insane, to the point that I may look at trying to sue him. At which point, as like a season ticket holder, like could my dad, who's technically season, could he sue Mike Vrabel for trying to lose when, again, he's going to go in 2025 and do the same thing that in 2023 he vowed he would never do? Because if they do that, I mean, I will lose all respect for Mike Vrabel. And I like Vrabel. But you cannot get up there every single freaking day and act like a total know-it-all a-hole and then go do the one thing that every single person in the city kept saying, why don't you try the All-American left tackle at left tackle when the left tackles that you have freaking suck? Why don't you try that? And Vrabel was just, we think Peter's a guard. And by the way, if Vrabel thought at any point he got it bad here, do that type of stuff in Boston and see what happens. If they take Will Campbell and stick him at left tackle, I am going to go nuts. And you should too. And this is why I am so thankful that the Patriots have given Vrabel this job and have really kind of hollowed out the infrastructure to really allow Vrabel to do whatever he wants. Because yes, Elliot Wolf is still there. And yes, Elliot Wolf says he's in charge, but nobody thinks he is. It's the Vrabel show. The power he wanted here that Amy wouldn't give him. It's his show. Him and Cowden and Stretch and his bozo crew. Todd Downing is there. I'm sure Tim Kelly will be there soon enough. Jason Hodeling is the line coach or is one of the line coaches up there. But if Vrabel all of a sudden does a 180 and says, oh, no, I'm actually going to let the left tackle play left tackle and I don't give a rat's ass about his arms, then I may have to fly up there, get credentialed from Stacey James at the Patriots, and go sit in the press conference and say, so why in the F did you not let Peter Skoronski play left tackle when you ran out Andre Dillard and Jalen Duncan, two of the worst players in the history of the Tennessee Titans? Because I'd like an answer. I'd like a response. Because all I remember is I kept saying, hey, why can't they play him at left tackle? Oh, you don't understand, Jared. I'll never forget Dave McGinnis. And I love Dave McGinnis with all my heart. But Dave McGinnis works for the team. And I'll never forget Dave McGinnis trying to sit there at training camp and tell me, well, guard, center, guard is a really important in today's NFL. And I'm like, you know what else is important? Tackle. You know what's more important? Tackle. Guard, center, guard. Unbelievable. Vrabel. One texter in the text line said, Nick Saban called Rick Spielman the biggest joke in the game. I replied and said, so why did Saban hire him at Alabama? I mean, again, oh yeah, he sucks. Hey, he hired him at Alabama. I guess he sucks that bad. One texter says, let's focus on the arm length being the similarity between the two, but not mention that Will Campbell is 2 inches taller and 10 pounds heavier as a college player. Well, first of all, being heavier makes you more like a guard than it makes you like a tackle. Secondly, the reason Skoronski had to play guard and not tackle, what everybody told me out there, was his arm length. So we're just going to all change the narratives now. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Robert Kraft of the Patriots, they will get what they deserve if they let Vrabel up to his own devices. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, there is an accusation that has been pulled against me, but I also want to get to the Titans told us something that we already knew today. What they're not telling us is exactly what I really want to know. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Trevor Matich will be with us in less than 30 minutes. So the Tennessee Titans today told the world they know who they're drafting. Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, reporting it will be Cam Ward with the first overall pick, the quarterback out of Miami. I don't think that's much of a surprise to anybody. The Titans were holding their pre-draft press conference today, and if there was any daylight that you thought existed between the Titans and taking Cam Ward with the first overall pick, they absolutely erased it when saying, yeah, we got trade offers, but we're going to take Cam Ward. Play the cut.
Is it safe to say you know who you're picking at 1? And if so, what would it take to maybe change your mind at this point?
Yeah, no, we've come to a consensus. The entire organization is to stay at that pick, and I guess you'll find out Thursday night who we pick.
Did you have a lot of offers or a lot of interest from other teams?
There was interest. Yeah, I thought that was doing our due diligence and going through the process to listen to those offers. And there were. I don't want to go into specifics of what the offer was or what the teams were, but there were offers.
Okay. So that's the extent of our knowledge, which is the Titans love Cam Ward, and they're going to take Cam Ward number 1, and there were offers, but we don't know what they were. It's a pretty important detail, right? Were they, good offers? And see, this is why this is important. Because I will say this, when you're a general manager or, in Chad Brinker's case, the president of football operations, whatever, when you're in that chair, you know that you've been hired to be fired and that for today, you're in charge. Now, does that mean that tomorrow you'll be in charge? No. Does that mean that if you get fired, you'll get another job? No. Does that mean? No. So for this moment, you are in charge. It is your job. It is your decision, and it is your career. You've worked your entire life to be in this spot, and you'll only get to make this one pick. And if you blow this pick, you don't get another one. But again, many of people like me just don't believe Cam Ward is that guy. We don't believe that Cam Ward is the next Peyton Manning or the next Andrew Luck or the next Joe Burrow. And there's a lot of people that think that Cam Ward may not even be the next Sam Darnold. Again, Bill Polian, a Gold Jacket Hall of Famer, said he's not even Jared Goff as a prospect. Now, maybe he is the next Mahomes. I don't know. But I've always said this. If you are in that seat, and you believe that that guy is an absolute game changer, I mean a force multiplier, you take him. If you believe that he is the next Jaden Daniels, you take him. And not everybody's going to believe that. But I need to know what the quality of the offers are before I can sit there and say, oh, no, this was their guy through and through. And again, what did Mike Borgonzi say? He said, I don't want to get into the offers, or I don't want to get into the details of the offer. In fact, can we play the end of that cut again, Reed, where he says teams plural, but he says offers singular, which I found to be very fascinating. Go ahead and play that cut again for me.
Did you have a lot of offers or a lot of interest from other teams?
There was interest. Yeah, I thought that was doing our due diligence and going through the process to listen to those offers. And there were. I don't want to go into specifics of what the offer was or what the teams were, but there were offers.
I don't want to get into what the offer was. Offers. Well, it's pretty important detail. In corporate America, what oftentimes happens is there's a job that becomes available, and they already know who they want to hire. But in corporate America, it's a policy that we have to go ahead and interview 5 or 6 people because that's what our corporate handbook and motto says we have to do. So go ahead, post the job online. Let every Tom, Dick, and Harry apply for the job. And then let's pick a couple, interview them, but we know we're not going to hire them because we already know who we're going to hire. When you say, well, we had to go through the process, we had to hear out some of the offers, does that mean that the Giants and the Browns and everybody else that called, that they made real pushes to get to number one? That they said, hey, we'll give you 334, our first next year, and our third this year. And you said, oh, man, I wish, but we really, really love the quarterback. Because if that's the case, on one hand, I'll say you guys are freaking stupid, because that is an incredible haul for a quarterback who, again, consensus is the 10th best player in this draft. That is a freaking haul, you morons. But on the other hand, I'll say, hey, if your conviction is that he is the guy, period, well, who am I to tell you don't take him? But I need to know the details of the offer before I can sit there and decide what the Titans really feel. Because regardless of whether or not the Tennessee Titans are taking the best quarterback in a bad draft, he'll always have the expectation of being the number one quarterback to live up to. The number one pick in the draft. We will look back at this and we will say, yeah, Cam Ward, Kyler Murray, Jameis Winston, Jamarcus Russell, it didn't really work out. Or we'll look at it and we'll say, Joe Burrow, John Elway, Peyton Manning, Cam Ward. That's what it'll be. Trevor Lawrence was one of the best prospects in the draft. He has not made it as a pro in the NFL. So when we talk about these slam dunk number ones, we talk about Burrow before we talk about Lawrence. So I want to know, when it comes to the Titans, what were the offers? Because if the Titans decided to take Cam Ward, because Abdul Carter had a foot injury, so take him off the board, and I do not have a problem with that. I would not draft Abdul Carter. If I were the Giants and I was sitting there at 3 and I was on the clock, I would do whatever it takes to get out of the pick, and if I couldn't get out of the pick, I'd take somebody else. But again, Abdul Carter's hurt. Okay. I would still take Travis Hunter, because I'm not tying myself to a quarterback who is an okay-ish prospect, especially when I don't have the infrastructure in place to probably support him to become a star. That's just me. But again, when it comes to the offers, did you get to the combine and the Giants and the Browns and everybody else said, we'll give you 3 to move up. We're not going to give you more. This quarterback's not that good. Again, to me, it's a pretty important detail. And I don't know who asked that question, by the way, Reed. Do we know who asked that question about were there offers?
I don't know. I can't make out the voice.
I can tell it's not Kayla Anderson. Can we play that question again?
Yep.
And see, I know it's not Kayla. I mean, look, I know it's a woman. I know it's not Kayla. I know it's not Teresa. I'm trying to think of who else it could be. Play the cut again.
Did you have a lot of offers or a lot of interest from other teams?
Good question.
Is that Jill?
Now, oh, you know what? It probably was.
Yeah.
Good question, Jill. Very good question. Now, the one thing, Jill would get an A from me for that question. She wouldn't get an A+. I'm going to tell you why. Because as soon as he finished that, it should be, why can't you say how good the offers were? Because, again, that's what I want to know. What I want to know is, did you turn down some granddaddy package in order to take Cam Ward? Again, we know, because it's been reported by Florio and Schefter and everybody else, that in 2020, the Bengals held the number 1 pick. It was Joe Burrow, and Miami at 5, who had tanked the previous season, offered 3 first-round picks to try to move up and take Joe Burrow. And what Schefter reported as was 3 first-round picks and more. And Cincinnati told Miami, don't call, we're not interested. So somebody, again, I want to know, how good were the offers? Because then this tells me how much you really love Cam Ward or not. And if you turn down a granddaddy package, I'll say on one hand that you're stupid, but I'll also give you credit for standing by your conviction. On the other hand, it kind of feels like you're settling with the pick. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
We certainly have a lot of needs in the team right now. So, we're going to do our best to, stay true to the board, draft the best player available, not really reach for needs at this point. But this is a big opportunity for this organization, really a tone setter, this draft, for the guys that we bring in here right now.
That was Mike Borgonzi talking about how, hey, we're not going to reach. We're going to take the best player available. I do laugh because, Reed, if you could, yesterday, we had Mel Kiper and Field Yates. They had their kind of final breakdown before the draft. And, Mel was just ripping the Titans 8 ways to Sunday for the fact that they are going to overdraft Cam Ward. And so here is the general manager sitting there saying, yeah, we don't want to, make a need pick. We don't want to go off the board. We want the board to speak to us. We're going to make those decisions. And with the first pick, we're going to take a guy that PFF has graded or has ranked as the 20th best player. Daniel Jeremiah has as the 8th best player. Mel Kiper Jr. has as the 6th best player. The Athletic has as the 13th best player. CBS has him as the 3rd best player. I don't know where they got that from, but hey, that raises the average up. The average there is 10. But listen to Mel. This was Mel Kiper and Field Yates. This was Mel Kiper going nuts again about the one thing that Mike Borgonzi is saying, like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're not going to pick for need. We're going to let the board speak to us. We're going to take the best player available. And this was Mel Kiper yesterday.
They are a team with Brian Callahan, wants to handpick their quarterback. And like I said, he wants a guy that can throw it all over the yard when everybody knows you're throwing. This guy has the arm talent. GM coming from Mahomes. Kind of, you see those arm angles that Mahomes throws from. So I think they're trying to hit a grand slam or a home run here. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to swing for the fences here. And that's what they want at quarterback. And like I said, the days of the single double are over. So this is what you're trying to do. You're not taking the best player in the draft, number 1 here. You're not taking the 2nd, 3rd, 4th best player. Okay. You're probably taking anywhere between the 5th and the 10th best player. Field, I'll ask you. I have Cam Ward at 6. Yep. Where's Cam Ward on your board? I can tell you consensus in the league. Where do you have him?
Yeah, I have him 6. And I think that's probably closer to the high end of where many in the league evaluate him. He does have some huge fans in the NFL, but there are other people that are more skeptical. Actually, Shefty had a column that dropped on ESPN.com today in which he noted one general manager doesn't have a first-round grade on any quarterback this year.
They're telling you. They're saying, they're like, hey, you're drafting for need here with the 1st overall pick. And the Titans brass, the one thing they're telling us is what we're not going to do is we're not going to draft for need. Oh, boy. So one of two things. This can only be one of two things. Either the Titans board is so much different than everybody else's and everybody else is stupid, or the Titans are drafting for need, the things that get general managers in serious hot water, things that guys that have already done it before would probably say, yeah, mistake I made was when I drafted for need. And here are the Titans saying, you do not do this, and then doing it. I remember when I was a kid, I think I was 10 years old, and I saw on SportsCenter that Jerry Rice was going to give up red meat, candy, and soda. And I was like, you know what? I think I should do that. And I told one of my friends, I'm going to give up candy, red meat, and soda. And that night, I ordered a cheeseburger and a soda. That's what the Titans are doing. The difference is I was 10 then. They're running a multi-billion-dollar organization. 615-737-1025 here on our program. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Indy Ben texts in and says, Jared, once again, no other team was offering a haul to move up. The entire NFL was telling you they don't like this quarterback class, so why would another front office mortgage their future for a guy they don't fully believe in? So I tend to agree with that logic. My guess is that the Browns said, hey, we'll go up. We've got a price, but we'll go up. And it's not your traditional price. The Giants at 3 probably said, we have a price, but we're not going to go beyond it. And so the Titans probably shrugged it off and said, well, the price is the price. And I get that. But the difference between the rest of the NFL and you is the Titans could have signed Sam Darnold or traded for Geno Smith or even signed Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston and said, hey, there's no good quarterbacks in this class. We're going to draft Travis Hunter And then next year we'll find a quarterback, or we'll figure out the quarterback position as we go. But this year, fans, it's going to be tough because there's just not a quarterback worth taking number 1 overall here. You can do that. In fact, again, the Lions ended up taking Calvin Johnson. Jamarcus Russell was off the board, but the Lions' whole premise was we'd rather go get a quarterback next year, and it ended up being Matthew Stafford. So that's what I would have done. If nobody wanted to trade up, I would be drafting Travis Hunter number 1 overall. I'd be playing him on both sides of the ball, and we'd be on our way. Now, I'd have Sam Darnold at quarterback, so it'd be a little different, but still. But I agree with, again, the sentiment that, the rest of the league doesn't think this quarterback class is that good because it's probably not. And it's just the Titans and the Titans fans that seem to think Cam Ward is a top-of-the-board guy. Carson says, they said they would not pass on a generational talent, but Cam Ward is not generational. Abdul Carter is. So I'm going to dispute that. I don't think Abdul Carter is a generational talent. I believe that Myles Garrett coming out of A&M was a generational talent. Lawrence Taylor coming out of North Carolina was a generational talent. Calvin Johnson coming out of Georgia Tech was a generational talent. I think people would argue Marvin Harrison Jr. was a generational talent. And I bet that if the Titans were on the clock and Marvin was in this year's draft, Marvin would go number 1 overall. Those are the generational talent type players. Abdul Carter profiles as a 7th overall pick in your traditional draft, which is better than Cam Ward, who projects as your, 14th pick in last year's draft. But generational talent, I don't think so. One text says, Jared, would you rather trade for George Kittle or Mark Andrews, and what are you willing to give up to do it? I'd rather trade for Mark Andrews because it will cost less than George Kittle. I mean, again, I need the 49ers to put Kittle on the block, which they haven't indicated they're going to do. I need the 49ers to put Kittle on the block before I can start talking about getting excited about trading for him. Andrews is legitimately on the block. And what I would want to do is day 3 picks. I don't give a rat's ass about day 3 picks. I heard a question was asked today to Mike Borgonzi about day 3 picks, about, when it comes to the day 3 picks, how do you find starters in day 3? I'm like, day 3 starters. Ain't worried about that. I'm worried about the good picks. So if you have to trade a 5th rounder or a 6th rounder or something, I don't care. It does not bother me whatsoever. Day 1 and day 2 picks matter. Day 3 picks do not matter to me. 615-737-1025. Trevor Matich joins us next. His reaction to the news that the Titans are for sure drafting Cam Ward. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game. Stillman and Company, be sure to join us for the 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament. Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce we'll be back at the Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Folds of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com. Also, let's give something away because I'm in a good mood. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll win a pair of tickets to see Metallica. That's right, at Nissan Stadium on Saturday, May 3rd. Special guests include Limp Bizkit and Ice Nine Kills. Trevor Matich joins us now on the program. ESPN college football analyst presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trev, the Titans made it all but official today by telling everybody they're going to draft Cam Ward on Thursday night with the number 1 overall pick. However, at the same time, Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, the guys in charge, stressed how important taking the best player available is and letting the board speak to them and not reaching. Is there any way to justify Cam Ward at number 1 overall without saying that it was a need pick and that it was a reach?
I don't think you can say that. I think you'd have to say there's a premium on quarterbacks. And I listened to the press conference, and it did sound an awful lot like they were confirming that they were taking Cam Ward. But there's a couple of little caveats in there that made me think that maybe they weren't. Because it seems like with the first pick, they not only could announce that they're picking him, but they could actually start working on his contract. For goodness sake, they wouldn't have to wait till the draft in order for that stuff to start happening. And so maybe they're wanting people to think that they're taking Cam Ward, or that they might be taking Travis Hunter out of Colorado or Abdul Carter out of Penn State, and they're still hoping for a last-second better offer to come in to trade the pick. Because otherwise, why be so sneaky about it? Now, the only reason I can think of that they would be sneaky about it, if they already know they're going to take Cam Ward, is if the league has said to them that they want to keep some suspense for the draft, and they don't want to make the first overall pick a foregone conclusion that everybody knows, to take away that suspense for the TV show portion of it. So, but in terms of taking Cam Ward as the best overall player, if they take him, I hope they believe it. Because if they reach for a quarterback at number 1 who's not the best overall player, I understand that if they think legitimately that he is a legitimate, guy that's worth the pick, that he's worth the risk, that he really is that good, even if Carter or Hunter or somebody else might be better as an overall prospect. What would bother me to no end is if they are being influenced by ownership to take the quarterback, not because he's the best pick for them, but because he's the best pick for the stadium, for selling tickets. If they choose Cam Ward for that reason, where they would have taken somebody else if the stadium were already built and the tickets were already sold, then they're making an enormous mistake. But, like you said, it sounded like in that press conference, they're taking Cam Ward. And if they don't have to believe he's the best player, they just have to believe he's pretty close to it. And then you give him a little boost because of the quarterback position.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that he is up there with Abdul Carter, up there with Travis Hunter? And so, you know what? Ty goes to the runner. He's a quarterback. Take him. Or do you think, no, Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty and these players are significantly better than Cam Ward is, even though Cam Ward plays quarterback?
I think Abdul Carter is significantly better than all of them. Although I think Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State, is up there with them. Travis Hunter, who's the dual threat guy, receiver and corner out of Colorado, who won the Heisman Trophy, I worry about him just a little bit because everybody's talking about how he can play at a high level on both sides of the ball. Okay, that's mildly interesting because he's going to need to excel somewhere, not just be pretty good on a couple of different places. In other words, pretty good at a couple of different places is a guy you take later in the draft and he plays special teams and he's a hybrid guy and he can play receiver inside and outside and he can fill in as a punt blocking guy off the. That's what you do if you have a guy that's pretty good at a lot of things. To take a guy in the top 3 picks, you would better make sure that he can do one thing that's worthy of that pick. And Hunter insists that he wants to play on both sides of the ball. Okay, but what that means is that he won't be able to fully maximize his capability on either side of the ball, because guys with as much talent as he does work at one spot for a decade in the NFL to become the best they can possibly be. And if you're splitting time, I'm sorry, you're not going to be the best you can be. In college, in high school before that, you might be a better athlete than all the kids you're competing with. And so you beat them anyway. But in the NFL, you need to know how to play the game. That means you need to understand techniques. That means you need to understand what the opponent is doing on the other side of the ball at a very high level. And I know this because I was drafted as a center. But in 2 of my first 4 years, I was hurt. And the other two of those first 4, everybody else got hurt. And I had to bounce around to different positions. I started games at left tackle, left guard, center, right guard. I played right tackle and tight end. I was number 46 for the Jets one year and did all the long snapping. And what I learned was that if I had to practice inside at guard, and all of a sudden the left tackle got hurt, and I had to go out and play left tackle, which I did. The first game I ever had to start at left tackle was at Buffalo against Bruce Smith, who's in the Hall of Fame, one of the greatest pass rushers ever to play. Well, I've been bouncing around to different positions, and now I got to go out there and face a guy who spent his entire football life excelling at that spot to beat that left tackle that's in front of him. So there's no way that I'm going to go out there and play his game. I had to go out there and play a different game, my game. I had to throw him off by not doing anything that he expected me to do, right? Well, same way with Travis Hunter. He's going to be facing guys that spend their entire football careers at one spot. So I don't know that Travis Hunter, if he mentally insists on playing both sides of the ball, he's not worth the top 3 pick, in my opinion. So now we get to Cam Ward to answer your question. Cam Ward has a similar kind of a deal where Cam Ward loves the way he plays. Cam Ward is very much a gunslinger mentality where he's going for the big play all the time, and he will try to extend plays where in college he can get away with it. In the NFL, there's no way he would get away with a lot of those things. It ended up being a sack instead of a touchdown. And all those different kinds of things, and his mental willingness to accept coaching and get away from some of the things that made him great in college, which is to say, take all those risks and move towards the things that'll make him great in the NFL. And that is build a foundation of, taking the check down on first down, because 2nd and 6 is a good thing in the NFL. And those are the kinds of things that, like Travis Hunter, with his dual threat desire, Cam Ward will be limited if he decides that he's going to do it his way and not the NFL's way. And so can Cam Ward be that good? The answer to that is, yeah, he can be. Because when you look at traits, which is one of the things they talked about in the press conference, that they look at traits and they draft for traits. The best trait that Cam Ward has, which is by far the best of any quarterback in this draft, is his ability to get the ball off quickly. He's got a lightning quick release. There are a lot of reasons that's a good thing. And because he was in a running offense in high school, and because he then went to the FCS, then he went to Washington State, transferred, then he transferred to Miami, he never really was able to lock in with a quarterback coach and learn the techniques and the craft of quarterbacking. So you take the traits where he's got a tremendous arm talent, but you're trusting that he will listen to you as a coach and develop the techniques and the craft of quarterbacking at the NFL. And so, really his success will be dependent upon his willingness to do that. If he is willing to do that, I think he can justify the first pick in the draft.
Trevor, if you own the team, would you be telling Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, hey, if you make this pick, you have to commit to Brian Callahan beyond this year? Or would you be willing to see how it goes with Callahan and then do what Chicago and New England have done for Williams and May, which is fire the coach and go bring in another coach and maybe risk setting back his development?
Yeah, that's a great point, because young quarterbacks a lot of times will end up being set back because they've got different coaches, whether it's head coach or offensive coordinator, in different systems and different terminologies and things like that. And it's hard to turn book knowledge of an NFL system into field knowledge, where you don't just think about what needs to happen, but you see something and you automatically react to it. It becomes muscle memory. That only happens over the course of years as you practice the same thing over and over with the same looks, with the same terminology, with a coach who understands how you learn. Because every guy learns differently as well. He accepts things differently. He responds emotionally in different ways to different buttons that are pushed. And if you keep on replacing the coach, that's a problem. Now, the only reason you wouldn't, you wouldn't resist replacing the coach is if the coach turned out to be just an absolute disaster and he's lost the team and he's not getting it done. Well, then you have to pick the lesser evil, which is get a new coach in here to work with this young quarterback. But I think it really is good news for Brian Callahan and really his entire offensive staff. If they draft Cam Ward, they have got to keep these guys together to give this guy the best chance to be able to flourish.
Okay, more draft talk with Trevor on the other side, plus who's there at 35. Because now we know Ward's at 1 and the Titans don't pick again until 35. There will be trade opportunities, but, who may be there? We'll get into that with Trevor, and we'll do it next. 615-737-1025. Trevor Matich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Stillman & Company, 1025, 1063 The Game. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. That's right. Nobody wants to deal with a plumbing, HVAC, or electrical emergency. Nobody. And most of the time, you do not know what it'll cost, if it will get fixed correctly, or if someone is just trying to sell you something. Well, guess what? When you call Hiller, and those are my guys, their experts are going to solve your problems, and they're going to solve them quickly. That's right. The price you told is the price you'll actually pay. And there are no hidden fees or surprises on your bill. And I know this because I use Hiller, so I've been through it, so I know what that's like. That's right. I absolutely love them. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. Book online now by visiting happyhiller.com. Do it like I do. Just pull it up right in the phone. Boom. In fact, my mom last week told me, hey, we got an issue with some plumbing. Is there any way? And I was sitting right there on my phone, and boom. Within 3 minutes, I had an appointment set for the next day. Hiller came on out, fixed it. That's how great they are. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call that fish truck today.
How many conversations have you had about the 35th pick in particular, and maybe your list of guys that you would say if he's here, it's going to be a hard decision to move off of this pick?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of the strategy. We've had those conversations here, especially over the last week. Chad, Brian, myself, Reggie, Dave, we've gone through the whole thing. And that's part of it. You have to be prepared at a certain point. If these players are on the board, if there's a few players that are there, do we not move and take that player? Or are there a few players there that we can move back and maybe pick up a pick? So those conversations have been ongoing here the last week or so.
There you go. That was Mike Borgonzi. Now that we know they're taking Cam Ward with the 35th pick, I think we can kind of move our attention, with the first pick, we can move our attention to the 35th pick. Trevor Matich with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, it happens every year where after night one of the draft, we'll be sitting there on Thursday night and we'll be saying, my goodness, this guy is still on the board. Who could it possibly be? Who are the guys that, if they're there at 35, given what the Titans need, given what the Titans are doing with Cam Ward, who are you circling and saying, if this guy's there, we are taking him, no questions asked? Who stands out in your mind from that opinion?
Well, I think it starts with, there are guys that are close, and there are a bunch of guys that are really bunched up in terms of grade in that area. You've got to take a guy that will help Cam Ward, because you want Cam to be able to have success right out of the bat. You don't want him to go out and have to learn bad habits to try to get the ball to a substandard receiving core and then unlearn the bad habits as the receiving core improves. You want him to come out with good habits. And so Calvin Ridley, I think, is going to be fine. Behind him, they don't seem to have a whole lot. And I think that right now, in thinking about receivers that they could take, there's a couple of guys that have a chance to be there at 35. One's Emeka Egbuka. He's a guy that you've talked about a lot, Jared, and I like him. You like him. I mean, he's a terrific route runner. He's got a big catch radius. He's the kind of guy that'll catch the ball and move the chains. But I like Luther Burden out of Missouri even better than I like Egbuka, only because Burden has a much better burst after the catch. Burden is more likely than Egbuka to catch a slant, step out of a tackle, and then outrun everybody else to the end zone. And so I think that kind of big playability would be important for them. So those are two receivers that I think will be available in that range. And I would take either one of them at 35. But if one was available, I would take Burden out of Missouri because of his explosiveness.
Trev, what do you think of the edge rushers that are slated to go in the late first round? There's Donovan Ezaraku at Boston College. He led the country in sacks last year. There's James Pierce out of Tennessee, Mike Green out of Marshall. Michael Williams has been up and down the board in the first round out of Georgia. He's got some injury concerns. What do you make of the edge rushers that would be there? And would any of those guys, if they're there, would any of those guys be, jump off the page, got to take them at 35?
None of them jump off the page. Ezaraku is one of those guys that, you talk about traits. He has got a really quick first step. And that's important because it helps to break down the pass set of a tackle. That's really critical. Talk about James Pierce, who will definitely be available then. He'll probably go sometime in the second round out of Tennessee. He is really effective when he doesn't get punched. He's another guy that's very quick. He can get low, but when he gets punched, he kind of gets thrown off of his game. You look at Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, is another guy who has a whole lot of upside. His physicality, his size, 6'5", about 270, he runs a 4.6 40. Everything is great with that. The problem is that he doesn't get a lot of sacks. He's got the moves that you would say, this guy, look at that move. Look at him swipe the hands. Look at him spin inside. Look at him go speed to power. Everything's great. But he just doesn't get a lot of sacks. I think he had 4.5, 5 sacks last year. Yep. And that's not a whole lot of sacks for a guy that you expect to be a first or even high second round edge rusher. Now, there may be reasons for that I don't know. And he might well be worth drafting and having, being coached up and have those things work. But These are things that you really need to look at from that position. So, once again, though, you've got a whole bunch of guys that are just completely bunched up. I mean, after Abdul Carter, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there are 7 edge rushers within 1/10 of a point on the NFL's draft grading. 7 within 1/10 of a point. They're not all going in the first round, right? And so you just have to decide what positive traits you like, and what negative traits you're worried about.
Trev, when it comes to the Titans and the rest of the first round kind of is a wash other than who may fall, but I am fascinated by what we may see Thursday night. First question for you, just kind of a lightning round here. What do you make of the reports Shedeur Sanders is falling, and do you expect him to go in the first round?
I expect Shedeur Sanders to go in the first round because he's the second quarterback in this draft right now. It may be that Jackson Dart jumps up ahead of him, but that's another thing is that after Cam Ward, you've got 7 or 8 quarterbacks that are all bunched up in the grades. And so it wouldn't surprise me if someone moved up in the first round to get him because they consider him the second, but I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to.
How high would you draft Ashton Genty, given the fact that he plays running back and that's not really that valuable of a position?
I think what helps Ashton Genty is Saquon Barkley of Philadelphia. In the second half of the regular season, Jalen Hurts, their quarterback, struggled with injury. Their passing game took a dive, really, in the second half of the season. Then he got healthy, Hurts did, for the playoffs and, became MVP of the Super Bowl. But during that time when the passing game wasn't there, it was Saquon Barkley making spectacular play after spectacular play. You add that to what Christian McCaffrey has done, and I think teams will see an elite running back as one that's worthy of taking high. And a lot of people think that he'll go at number 6 to the Raiders.
Trevor, Will Johnson at Michigan has a hamstring injury that I think he's overcome, but now has a knee injury that has been reported and has been flagged. Could he fall out of the first round?
I don't think he'll fall out of the first round, depending on the nature of that knee injury. But staying healthy is an important thing, and I think really the Titans have kind of shown with Snead, the rest of the league, what happens when you take a risk on injury. Maybe it'll work out, and the guy will be fine. Caleb Farley, same way. He drafted him in the first round, defensive back out of Virginia Tech, and he never got healthy. And so it just depends on the nature of that injury. For example, I'm not worried about the foot injury of Abdul Carter out of Penn State because the nature of that injury is that once it heals up, it's 100%. It shouldn't be a nagging problem for him. But what the traits of Will Johnson, he's tall, he's long, he's fast, he's disruptive, he's terrific, and he's hurt. And the hurt part is the problem.
Trevor, is there any player that you see consistently mocked in the first round who you would not touch with a 10-foot pole?
Ooh, that is a terrific question. I would say not necessarily wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, but I would say not take so high. Will Campbell, tackle out of LSU, is mocked by a lot of people to going number 4 to the New England Patriots and the first offensive lineman taken. And I wouldn't take him till about middle of the first round at the highest. And the reason is not necessarily his short arms. He's got famously short arms, and people have talked about that a lot. Didn't bother him in the SEC. I think he'd be fine from that standpoint. The problem is he stands up very straight in his set. And that combined with the short arms means that NFL pass rushers are going to turn sideways, stick one long arm into the middle of his chest, and he's already standing up high. And I think he'll have to totally relearn how to pass protect in the NFL. I would not take him in the top 10. And right now he's mocked to go in the top 5.
Okay, last one. I'm going to put you on the spot for this, if that's okay. Really put you on the spot. Rank how you view these quarterbacks coming out of college. Marcus Mariota, Cam Ward, Vince Young, Jake Locker, Will Levis.
Oh, my gosh. Coming out of college, I would say Mariota first, Ward second. What were the other ones?
Vince Young.
Vince Young, I wouldn't be tempted to put in the top 2. Will Levis, I would not be tempted to put in the top 3. And who are we missing?
Locker.
Jake Locker. Yeah, Jake Locker coming out he was kind of a defensive tackle playing quarterback, and he never really had the accuracy in college that he would be able to carry into the NFL. That's kind of a motley group right there. But I would, if given coming out of college, given the choice, I would have taken Mariota.
Okay, so you would go Mariota, and then you would go Cam Ward over Vince Young?
Yeah, because Vince Young was very much a physical monster. Everything that you saw him do in college, he out-physicaled everybody. In the NFL, that's mildly interesting. Now you got to add some other things to that, which he was not able to do very effectively. And so I always worried about a physical specimen, like Jalen Miller, coming out of Alabama this year, coming into college, coming into the NFL. I see a lot of traits that those two share, although Vince Young was a whole lot better in college than Jalen Milroe, but still same kind of thing. When he does physical things, you go, wow. And when he's got to work through progressions, you're still waiting for it to happen.
Trevor Matich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. When experience matters, he is the best. Trevor, we will see you Thursday night at Twin Peaks.
Looking forward to it, Jared. It's going to be fun.
Yep, our draft night special. And again, everyone thinks I'm going to go crazy. I would be surprised since I know who they're going to pick. But there is a feeling that I have after the Titans made it official today. Well, they really made it unofficial. They're taking Cam Ward. We'll get to that next. And I cannot shake that feeling. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. And 10 years ago, I started right here at 1025 The Game in April of 2015. In fact, it was April 20th of 2015 that I began here at 1025 The Game. And the Titans were on the clock with the number 2 pick in a draft that featured 2 quarterbacks. And I kept thinking to myself, please don't take Mariota. Please don't take Mariota. Please don't take Mariota. But I knew in my heart after their pre-draft press conference, the Titans were, in fact, going to draft the quarterback out of Oregon with the number 2 overall pick. Now, the reason I said please don't draft Mariota was something that I have crapped upon for years, which is this fan belief that, oh, the Titans never develop quarterbacks, and so these quarterbacks that the Titans are going to draft are going to be no good either. Now, I would have taken Jameis Winston. I thought Jameis Winston was the man coming out. But Mariota, not so much. And then the Titans took Mariota, and I changed my tune after one training camp practice, but I think, again, it was in large part because I wanted to believe it. But in my heart, I didn't believe in Mariota as a draft prospect. And they took him, and they tried, and there were moments, but it didn't work. And here we are today, and the Titans are going to draft Cam Ward with the first overall pick. They've said it. Again, they didn't say it, but they spent an entire 30-minute pre-draft press conference, and I don't believe they talked about one other individual prospect. Ian Rappaport at NFL Network has already reported that the Titans are taking Cam Ward. The Titans said, we know who we're going to pick. The Titans said the consensus has been made. And the Titans said, don't bother calling us. We're taking Cam Ward. And I heard Joe Dubin today lay out exactly what I think is going to happen and exactly the problem I think the Titans, the real issue with why this is not going to work out, which the reason of why I have this impending doom inside of me. And here's what Big Joe said this morning, and I could not have said it better myself.
They're going to take Cam Ward and then fire Callahan in January, and we start all over again. Probably. Yep. They shouldn't, but probably. So they'll go get a quarterback, get a receiver in the second round, won't get a third rounder, and then they'll draft guys in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round that we will never hear from after this year. All right. Can't wait. When you could get 7 or 8 guys. There's scenarios you can get 6 of the first 103 guys. You make a few 6 of the first 103, man. 6 guys, not 2. Plug these guys in. Let them go.
Joe's right. I heard it this morning when I was driving. And again, the story that came out, Peter Schrager at ESPN reported that the Giants and the Browns are taking calls on the 2nd and 3rd pick in the draft. That is a report, by the way, that I don't believe. I do not believe people want to trade up in this draft. I think people want to trade down. I think the Browns and the Giants are telling Schrager that they're taking calls because they want people to call them because they'd like to trade down. I don't think it's going to happen. But again, when Chase told Joe of that report, Joe said, get on it, Titans. To which Chase said they're going to take Cam Ward. And what Big Joe said is absolutely the truth. That is the doom that I feel as a Titan fan. And I mean this with all due respect to Cam Ward. But any quarterback that the Titans probably would have taken this year that wasn't Joe Burrow, wasn't Trevor Lawrence, wasn't Andrew Luck, wasn't that high end of a prospect. Caleb Williams last year coming out was viewed as a generational talent. If it wasn't one of those guys with the number 1 pick, I probably would have hated it no matter what. But I look at the scenario and I look at a team with a bad owner, with a bad absentee owner, with a team president who is not qualified to have the position, with a general manager with no experience, with a head coach whom he did not hire, and a head coach who already got hired to work with the young quarterback and failed. with only 2 picks in the top 100, with no real edge rusher, with no real dominant defensive player, with 1 wide receiver, with no tight end. And I think to myself, there's no way this ends well. There's no way that this ends well. There's no way that the Titans end up hitting this out of the park. There's no way that they've identified the right guy, that they have a plan in place to properly develop him, that they have the right people in place to foster that development, that they have the ammunition to be able to build a team around him, that the fan base and the owner and the coaching staff and everybody else will be patient enough to develop so that this guy can be a superstar. When Josh Allen entered the NFL, he was not the day one starter. That was Nathan Peterman. Josh Allen had the number 2 defense in the NFL in 2018 and the number 3 defense in 2019. Your defense has 1 player on it, and we don't even think he's that good. Today, the Titans posted a video. It was their first day of their voluntary offseason program. And the guys that were entering the building, Arden Key and Tajay Spears and Chig Okonkwo, and again, the same old nobodies that they've lost with over the last 2 years. And so when Big Joe says, so you mean to tell me that the Titans are going to draft Cam Ward, they'll fire Callahan by January, they got 2 picks in the top 100, and they'll do it all over again? I hope I'm wrong. I do. I hope I am wrong. Desperately hope I am wrong. Hope Big Joe's wrong. But I don't feel it. As a Titan fan, I don't feel it. And people have said the Titans chose the wrong year to suck. And that might be true. But Caleb Williams was deemed a generational player, and it looks like Chicago's on their way to ruining him. Trevor Lawrence was viewed by everybody as a generational player, and Jacksonville has underperformed with him as their quarterback. I saw Mike Greenberg went on a rant the other day in which he said, none of these quarterbacks that go number 1 are MVPs. Not Brady, not Allen, not Mahomes, not Jackson. None of them. Not Aaron Rodgers. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I think it's because the teams that pick quarterbacks number 1 are the Jags and the Browns and the Raiders with Jamarcus Russell. And every now and then there's one of these Manning or the Bengals with Joe Burrow that get lucky and draft a transcendent player who changed the entire culture of an organization. Who's more in that draft? The best player. Considered one player. Get the athletic ranked the big dad, the athletic hyper did 2020 10 say tight 2027 regardless of who the quarterback is. But man, it's just a depressing feeling. And I hope I'm wrong, but when you heard Big Joe say that, did you really challenge it? Or did you kind of feel the same impending doom that I have? 615-737-1025. We'll get to some phones. 615-737-1025. Plus, the biggest problem I have with not trading down, and it was something that a coincidence, and I teased this earlier today in the show, but there is a coincidence that I found almost shocking. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Is it safe to say you know who you're picking at 1? And if so, what would it take to maybe change your mind at this point?
Yeah, no, we've come to a consensus. The entire organization is to stay at that pick, and I guess you'll find out Thursday night who we pick.
Did you have a lot of offers or a lot of interest from other teams?
There was interest. Yeah, I thought that was, doing our due diligence and going through the process to listen to those offers. And there were. I don't want to go into specifics of what the offer was or what the teams were, but there were offers.
There you go. That was Mike Borgonzi saying, yeah, there were offers, but yeah, nah. And there's one fun fact about the draft that I do want to point out. And it happens to be a coincidence with the Predators and the Titans. And I think we can agree that the Predators and the Titans both are not necessarily known for excellent drafting. David Reed, would you say that's fair?
That's a very fair assessment.
Okay. So I just noticed this when I was just kind of searching around old drafts and things of that magnitude. The Titans and the Predators have each drafted one Hall of Famer in their 30 years as Nashville franchises. And that is making the assumption that Derrick Henry is going into the Hall of Fame. Fair to say, Reed?
The assumption, or fair to say that he's going to be the only one that has a shot?
If he doesn't get in there, then it ain't gonna be anybody else.
That's true. Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
With that. Yep.
So I think Henry's getting into the Hall of Fame. I hope Henry gets into the Hall of Fame. He should get into the Hall of Fame. So the Predators drafted Shea Weber, and he's the only Predator in the Hall of Fame. And as of right now, they haven't drafted another guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Yossi's not going to be in the Hall of Fame. Rene's not going to be in the Hall of Fame. Right now, it's Weber and Henry. Did you know that in each case, Shea Weber and Derrick Henry were the third of 3 second-round picks that the club had that year? Derrick Henry was picked after Jack Conklin went in the first round, Kevin Dodd went in the second round, Austin Johnson went in the second round, then Derrick Henry 45th overall. Shea Weber was picked after Ryan Suter in the first round, Konstantin Glazachev in the second round, and Kevin Klein in the second round. In fact, Kevin Dodd, the first second-round pick in the 2016 draft for the Titans, played 18 games in the NFL before busting out with 1 sack. Shea Weber, as we know, is headed to the Hall of Fame, technically still an inactive player. He's already in the Hall of Fame. But Konstantin Glazachev, the first second-rounder, did not play in the NHL. So if the Titans did not have extra second-round picks, they would have never drafted Derrick Henry, and they would have been stuck with Kevin Dodd, who busted out after 18 games and 1 sack. And if the Predators did not have 3 second-round picks in 2003, they would have been stuck with Konstantin Glazachev, who never played in the NHL and would not have Shea Weber, who is the best defenseman in the history of the Predators, a gold medalist captain, and a Hall of Famer. And the reason I bring this up is because I do think there is something to be said about what I call the dartboard theory, which is everybody's got a process, and some of these teams bat better than others because their processes are better, but nobody bats 1,000. Even the best. I heard Bill Polian say this today. I know Robbie and Rexford will say it doesn't count because Polian said it. They think he doesn't know anything. But I heard Bill Polian say today, the best general managers bat about 550 in the draft. Well, that's why you want more throws at the dartboard. And forget about day 3 picks or anything. I'm talking about more throws at the dartboard with premium assets. And the only way that the Titans could have gotten that is to trade down with the number 1 pick. Can they trade down from 35 and maybe get a couple more throws at the dartboard because they'll pick up a third? Maybe. But I mean, I'm talking about real big artillery. And you get that, again, from getting extra chucks at the dartboard. I mean, I'm sure when David Poile was sitting there, I'd love to ask David Poile this question. But if he already drafted Ryan Suter and he already drafted Kevin Klein, my guess is they sat there in the draft room at Bridgestone Arena, which happened to be where the draft was that year. And they said, well, holy crap, we got Shea Weber ranked as the 17th best player, and he's still on the board. Take him. And with Derrick Henry, Blake Bedingfield had lobbied Mike Mularkey, who then was asked by John Robinson, what do you think? And he said, Henry. And those guys are going to the Hall of Fame, or in the case of Weber, are already in the Hall of Fame. So the dartboard theory matters. So when the Titans are saying, hey, we're going in on Cam Ward, and I get skipping the dartboard if Trevor Lawrence is on the board. I get skipping the dartboard if Joe Burrow's on the board or Andrew Luck's on the board. I would say go take the quarterback. But Cam Ward, really? That's the one that I guess I'd say bothers me a little bit. 615-737-1025 is our phone number here on the program, 615-737-1025. One texter says our phone line driven, by the way, by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Do you think Titans leadership may be taking Ward because he is something new, and they think it's easier to generate excitement about something new as opposed to something you already know what they are? Got to get ticket sales somehow, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be winning anytime soon. Unfortunately, I think so. And I don't know if it's because Amy wants ticket sales, or I don't know if it's just that the Titans have talked themselves into the new shiny toy. But I would love to talk to these veteran general managers. Again, I know the guys that you all think are dodo birds, but the guys that know what they're doing. And I'd love to say 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, who do you think's the better quarterback? Sam Darnold or Cam Ward? And if the answer is Sam Darnold, then why didn't you just sign him? But the thing is Sam Darnold's already played in the NFL, and so you guys are like, he sucks. Even though he won 14 games last year, and Cam Ward has yet to do that. One text says, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you want the number one pick? Yes, I wanted the number one pick. And the main reason I wanted the number one pick was to trade it for more picks. I thought about this today. I am actually at least a little depressed. Like a little, I am wondering, is it a bad thing that the Titans ended up with the number one pick? The old Chinese, what would they call it? Proverb or whatever, with the farmer and the, well, maybe. Oh, it's great that your son broke his leg. Well, maybe. Oh, or excuse me. Oh, it's terrible that your son broke his leg. Well, maybe. Oh, but it's great that your son's no longer going to the war. Well, maybe. Well, it's great you got the number one pick. Well, maybe. Now, if you do something dumb with it, because you're in position to take the only quarterback who's any good, but he's not that good, yeah, then it's not a good idea. One texter says, same old song and dance with this team, going to ruin another young quarterback. We have to hit on one first-round pick in the last decade. That's not true. You've hit on two. Conklin was a hit, and Simmons was a hit. I mean, let's not go crazy here. One texter said, I wonder if people said the same thing when Floyd Reese took McNair number 1. He took McNair number 3. And in fact, that year, Bill Polian, I know the general manager that Robbie and Retro thinks no good. Bill Polian was the general manager of the Carolina Panthers. They had the number 1 pick. They were an expansion franchise. And they traded out of the pick to go number 5. Kajana Carter went number 1 overall to the Bengals. And at number 5, they drafted Kerry Collins. Because they were not going to overdraft the quarterback. 615-737-1025. We continue. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
How many conversations have you had about the 35th pick in particular, and maybe your list of guys that you would say if he's here, it's going to be a hard decision to move off of this pick?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of the strategy. We've had those conversations here, especially over the last week. Chad, Brian, myself, Reggie, Dave, we've gone through the whole thing. And that's part of it. You have to be prepared at a certain point. If these players are on the board, if there's a few players that are there, do we not move and take that player? Or are there a few players there that we can move back and maybe pick up a pick? So those conversations have been ongoing here the last week or so.
There you go. That was Mike Borgonzi today. We now turn our attention to Big 35 because the Titans have made it obvious they're drafting Cam Ward with the first overall pick. They all but said it today. And one thing we have not gotten to today that we are doing one every single day. We prepare for the 35th pick in the draft on Friday night, and it is the Stillman and Company mock draft simulation. Okay, in our previous mock drafts, we've been on the board at 35. Again, the Titans are taking Cam Ward, number 1 overall, just as they did in Simulation 1, Simulation 2, and now Simulation 3. But in each case, we were able to trade down a couple of times, and we ended up with 4 players at the end of day 2. Tennessee on the clock, 35. It's Friday. And the Titans are on the clock. And as is the case in almost every single draft, there is a player that everybody mocks in the top 15, top 25, something that ends up there on day 2. You can't believe it. Sitting there saying, wait a minute, this guy's available? And in this case, with the Titans on the clock at 35, the top available players are Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan, Gray Zabel, the guard out of North Dakota State, Benjamin Morrison, the corner out of Notre Dame, Omar Norman Lott, the defensive tackle out of Tennessee, and Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State. Now, Colston Loveland, I have going at 14 overall in the latest mock draft that we did. I have him going 14th. So imagine my chagrin when Colston Loveland is sitting there with the 35th pick in the draft. Now, there are 2 trade partners, and we got to hear them out, right? Green Bay at 54 and the Chargers at 55. So I'm able to get a guy that the consensus big board says is a top 15 player in the draft in Colston Loveland, a tight end, a position I need because Chigakonkwo sucks. But there are 2 teams that want to call, Green Bay at 54 and the Chargers at 55. In both cases, again, I got to hear them out, right? In both cases, I answer the phone. In both cases, I ask for each team's first-round pick in next year's draft. In both cases, they say no. Green Bay says no, the Chargers say no. And that's the right thing for Green Bay or the Chargers to say. Hold on, wait a minute. No, we're not trading 54 and a first next year for 35. And we're not trading 55 and a first next year for 35. But again, you had to knock my socks off because I'm able to get, again, a top 15 player in this draft, a legitimate first-round tight end with the 35th pick on a team that, again, has Chig who stinks. So with that, the Tennessee Titans select Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan at 35 overall. And I go to bed on Friday with no wide receiver 2, no second edge rusher opposite Arden Key, who I don't even think is that good anyways. But I am not passing on Colston Loveland. And again, there's a handful of these guys that may be out there that if they're available, go turn in the card and we'll deal with everything else later. Again, the Texans looked at it a couple of years ago, took C.J. Stroud at 2, and then moved heaven and earth to take Will Anderson. And I think they're pretty happy with the quality of 2 players they got. And I remind every single person when it comes to the simulations and it comes to the mock drafts and it comes to what to expect on Friday night, because for us, can't we all say now the draft starts? I think we can say this. The draft starts on Friday night because we know they're taking Cam Ward. if there's a Colston Loveland there, if Tyler Warren's there, if, and I'm just looking through the list here at some of these guys, Jalen Walker's there, take them and deal with the rest later. So that's our third mock draft simulation. This time we don't get a bunch of players like we did last time, but I'll take Colston Loveland over the group. That's going to do it for us. A great show today. Again, we are 2 days away from the NFL draft. Thursday, we will be at Twin Peaks out in Madison. I expect to see a bunch of you there. Come on out and enjoy the draft. If you don't have draft plans with your buddies or anything, come on out. See us in Twin Peaks in Madison. Chris will be there. Derek will be there. Trevor will be there. It'll be the crew. We will be ready to roll. We'll see what happens with Cam Ward, and then we'll turn our attention to what the Titans do with pick number 35. That's it for us. We are out of here. An early exit. Vandy Baseball takes on MTSU. That's next. Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 2 on 102.5 The Game.